have to be the JCPOA plus plus, in the sense that it would have to recognize Iran's technological advancements over the last few years because it came at a great price. Scientists were martyred, and Iran was under sanctions, and the Americans are not going to compensate for that. And also, it's going to have to end the loopholes that existed in the original JCPOA, which Obama used to cheat Iran, and so did Trump until he tore up the deal. The United States, whenever would cheat Iran, there were no consequences uh, for their actions. They paid no political price, let alone any other price. So a potential nuclear deal, if we ever get there, and that's not for certain, of course, would be substantially different from the JCPOA. It would have to be under. It would have to be more. It would have to take these issues into account. But even if we do have a deal with the United States, the problem goes back again to what Scott was saying, and that is you sign a deal hypothetically, and then tomorrow you have something on Truth Social which completely negates everything and says, "Well, no, I don't like this deal, and we're going to have to do something else." So it makes working with the United States very, very difficult. I don't want to say impossible because I don't want to, rule out any success. It just shows how complicated it is. Even the negotiations with China, what Trump did was he went back to where the United States was before Liberation Day. We have the same tariffs that existed back then. The only difference now is that besides the fact that a lot of damage has been caused, but also there's now a 3-month period where the two sides have to negotiate. And during these 3 months, business people don't know what to do. They won't know whether to purchase goods, to move their factories, to invest, not to invest, because there will be this sense of um, it's ambiguous where things will be in the weeks and months ahead. It's unclear, and I think that that's a problem that we're going to face with the United States and Iran. It's a problem that Ansarullah will have to face. If I was Ansarullah, which I'm sure they would. That right now they're uh, upgrading their military capabilities, they're bringing in new weapons, they're developing new technology. Why? Because we don't know, and they don't know definitely what's going to happen in the weeks ahead. So this is the problem with Trump. His supporters call it strategic uncertainty, but I think it's more the man-child definition. I think the man-child definition of Scott is more accurate. I think this is more it's more of chaos than anything else, and this is something that we're going to have to deal with. Not just Iran, the Russians. I mean, one other very interesting thing has been how Trump has sort of evolved over the past few months with regards to Russia. If he could have on day one ended the war because he had momentum. He had won all the swing states. He won the popular vote, and he said during his campaign that he's going to end the war. He could have stopped it. He could have given the Russians the key concessions that they needed. The Russians probably would have given him some concessions too to get this over with, but he would have had to give most of what Russia wanted, and then it would have been over. But he didn't do that, and now he's gradually, not completely, but he's sounding more like Biden nowadays. Now he's not Biden, he's not there, but Kellogg obviously he seems to be as if he's a Biden employee. So the point is that we don't know where Trump is going to be on Russia, on Ukraine, where he's going to be on China, where he's going to be on global trade, where he's going to be on Iran, Yemen, Palestine in the weeks ahead. Everything is ambiguous. This, in my opinion, is actually in the long run beneficial to countries like Iran because this uncertainty is is causing countries to start to make increasingly think about making decisions and excluding the United States. Now, of course, the trade war itself was an incentive for this, and other issues also created this incentive, the sanctions, and so on. But I think that this chaos in Washington is a further another catalyst that will push the global majority, the global South, perhaps some in Europe, who knows, to rethink their place in the global order. And I think that's going to speeden the tilt away from the United States.
Scott, how much you've mentioned the recognition of a Palestinian state? How much of a game changer that would be if the United States under the Trump administration decides to do that?
We come to the problem, decides to do what? I mean, today he says, he's in Saudi Arabia right now. Who knows? Today, tomorrow, he and the Saudis may sit down and get the grand bargain that some people are talking about, where Saudi Arabia says, we will recognize the state of Israel. We will normalize relations with the state of Israel, which is the fulfillment of the Abrams Accord. In exchange for Trump saying, I recognize a Palestinian state, a two-state solution. Okay. And then the next day, when Hamas says, well, we're ready.
What's going on?
Well, no, Hamas doesn't get to,
good morning.
Doesn't get to participate.
I'm doing some work in the background with playing some
Well, how can you talk about a Palestinian state without Hamas?
That's
right. Haven't been beaten. There's sort of, if there was an election, you believe in democracy, don't you, Mr. President? I mean, we hear J.D. Vance and everybody else talking to the Europeans. Shame on you, Europe, for not being a good, free, democratic society, as suppressing the AfD, suppressing Marine Le Pen, suppressing Georgescu in Romania. You guys aren't democratic at all, but we're going to suppress the hell out of Hamas because we don't respect the Palestinian people. We don't respect their ability to choose their leader. This is what happens when you have a man who knows nothing about anything making policy decisions about some of the most complex issues there are out there. Is there a solution to the Hamas issue? Yes. China's been working on one. Russia's been working on it. They've brought people, I think it was 14 different factions together to try and come up with some sort of singularity that included Hamas but wasn't called Hamas. And Hamas was part of that discussion. Why doesn't the United States respect this? Why don't we participate in that? Ask to be briefed on that, help facilitate that. So when we sit down with the Saudis, we say we could support a Palestinian state, but we need the Chinese model of governance here. That would imply that you actually know something about the problem and you're prepared to come up with a solution. But Trump is just he hasn't reversed any of the policy statements he made about Hamas. Hasn't reversed a single one. We're negotiating with them, although supposedly we don't negotiate with terrorists. But we'll let that one slide for a moment because America's always negotiated with terrorists or what we call terrorists. But what is the policy on Hamas? Because you can't talk about a Palestinian state unless you have a policy on Hamas. A two-state solution implies there will be a Palestinian government. If there's an election today, the Palestinian people would vote overwhelmingly for Hamas. How do we handle that? So I don't know. I'm at wit's end because for 100 days I called a truce, and you know this, Nima. You know that I did this. You know that I did my very best to be fair towards the Trump administration, to give the Trump administration a chance to act out on the policies that Trump was articulating during the campaign, for Trump to build a team capable of fulfilling these campaign promises, turning them into.
You said you can barely hear me? Oh, that's probably because that thing was louder than me. But yeah, I'm up early. I'm over here encoding some videos, making some changes because the Valkyrie channel, YouTube changed their little policies or whatever. So a particular streaming segment that we had on the Valkyries channel, I can no longer stream it for now on there, so we moved it to Rumble. So now, much like this channel, well, actually that's not true because this channel doesn't really upload anymore, just streams. But now's channel will upload more and stream less. It's not that it's not going to stream at all. It's just that it won't stream the Bed Lounge gaming segments anymore. It's going to be on Rumble. And then their little IRL stuff and all that other stuff that they do for work and gaming and all that will be uploaded and also streamed. So I'm working on some stuff in the background there, and I'm also I have to come up with some new proposals because we need to get a big sponsor. We need to get a real big sponsor literally before July. So we got some stuff coming up there, a lot of things going on. But while I'm doing the encoding, taking a little break and listening to some world news and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm glad you guys are here this morning and joining me. Let's get back to it.
To, policy that can be implemented. And it was very difficult, watching Trump move forward on this because it just vacillated day at Russia. I mean, Professor Murray is right. He's all over the map on Russia. The Jekyll and Hyde nature of the Trump administration is playing itself out, and that, according to the latest news, Steve Witkoff and Keith Kellogg are both going to be in Istanbul as observers. But I mean, this is literally, Two-Face, that character from Batman. One face is good, one face is ugly, and which face are we going to get? Are we getting both faces? This is stupidity. Stupidity. It shows immaturity. First of all, Marco Rubio should say, no, I am going to be there. Or if you're going to pick a special envoy, pick one. Tell the world where you stand. But this notion that Trump's a genius, Trump's a master. He's sending Witkoff and Kellogg in so that the Ukrainians, the Russians, the Turks, and everybody have no idea what he's doing. That's because Trump has no idea what he's doing. That's because Trump isn't a leader enough to tell Keith Kellogg, sit down and shut up. If you ever open your mouth again while I'm having a guy speak about Russian policy, which Kellogg has done repeatedly, Trump will have Witkoff or somebody make a statement about the progress is made, and Kellogg shows up on TV and says something that undermines everything. Now, either Trump wants that to happen, or Trump isn't a strong enough leader to fire Kellogg, because that's firing offense. Any other administration, Kellogg would be fired for that. Any other administration, Kellogg would be fired for that, because that's stabbing the president in the back. But Trump is now rewarding this man by sending him with co-equal status with Steve Witkoff, who's the problem solver, which tells me that Trump doesn't want to solve the problem, that Trump's there to muddy the waters. Does Trump want a solution? Does he want a peace? I don't think Trump knows what he wants. I think Trump is scared. This is where I personally stand. The man-child is scared. He doesn't understand the complexities of this problem. And so what he's going to do is sabotage the process so that there's failure so he can walk away. That's what I think Trump wants, because he's not a leader. He's not a man of courage. He's a coward who has gotten himself into a situation that's outside his capacity to understand, and he's going to withdraw from it. And I'm concerned that this could be a pattern, because quitters, that's a pattern of behavior. And Donald Trump's a quitter when it comes to these decisive issues. I'm worried about the Iran negotiations, because there will come a time, if this thing is going to reach fruition, Donald Trump is going to have to give his stamp of approval on some very bold conclusions that give Iran capabilities that Trump is on record saying he will never allow. Israel definitely won't allow this, or doesn't want it. And does Trump have the courage to actually say, yes, this is what I stand for, etc.? Or as Professor Morandi said, will somebody sign a document, and the next day when everybody starts attacking Trump, does the man-child get his feelings hurt and come out and say something completely?
My opinion about Trump is a little bit more softer than Scott Ritter's. I think Scott Ritter is not taking into consideration that the powers that be. Trump is just the president. Doesn't really have the power everyone thinks he has. Doesn't. He has to fight his own cabinet. He has to fight the deep state and other nefarious individuals around the world. That's why presidents, even in the United States, get assassinated. If you don't follow the real people running the world and what they say, It's you could get killed for it. Just like President Zelensky, you think he's just wants to do what he's doing in right now in Ukraine or what? Nah, bro. If the minute this man says no to the people that's really pushing the war in Ukraine, he's a dead man. It's that simple. Same thing for Benjamin Netanyahu. Although what goes against him is his own country and the courts behind it that got him up on bribery charges and corruption charges, which he will lose his power and he'll be out and he'll be in prison. So everybody has to answer to somebody, and there's people Trump has to answer to. So Trump has to find strategic ways to make things work where it looks like he still serves the powers that be, but he's the one who mastermind and manipulate it to either work or fail, so he doesn't lose his life or position that he's currently in. That's what I think, and I don't think Scott Ritter is giving him enough credit on that. Like, in my opinion, I believe. Well, let me not even say it. I'll say it like this: Trump's allies tried to get him assassinated during his when he was running for president. When that bullet missed him, that was from an ally. I'm just letting you know that right now. That's my opinion on the matter, right? It's a warning shot to let him know, when you get into power, remember who runs you. They weren't supposed to miss. The Simpsons were supposed to happen. He was supposed to get killed, but that failed. But it's a reminder to him, listen, this is the deal when you get in office. I don't give a shit what ticket you run on or what policies you say before you get in office. When you get in office, X, Y, and Z will happen, and you will follow through. That's why you have these people out here, like what Scott Ritter was saying. Keith Kellogg is undermining him. Like, okay, if you're the president and Keith Kellogg's undermining you, fire him. But you notice he doesn't fire Keith Kellogg. Why? Because Keith Kellogg is not employed by Trump. Trump was told they want Keith Kellogg in this position. And no matter if he undermines Trump, you can't get rid of him, because the real people that run shit got Keith Kellogg in a compromising situation. He will do what they say, or his family will be dead, and him too. So this is the game that they gotta play, and I don't think Scott Ritter is giving Trump enough credit to, like, he came in on a bad hand. So how do you stop the war in Ukraine, and how do you stop this psychopath Benjamin Netanyahu, who also works for other psychopaths? How do you stop all this shit when the powers that be want it all to happen? Well, that one thing Scott Ritter got right is sabotaging. So Trump has to play buffoon, acts like he's an idiot, like he doesn't know, and he's calling Trump a coward, saying, oh, Trump is not leading. No, I don't think he's a coward. I think it's strategic leadership. He has to find a way to stay alive, but then also find a way to end the war in Ukraine and stop the genocide in Gaza. How do you do that without publicly or visually betraying those who truly run the world? Well, you got to make it look like you sabotage shit. Well, no, you got to make it look like it failed on its own and it had nothing to do with you. You was always with it. You said A, but B happened. And that's smart. But that's my opinion. So yeah, back to the news.
Completely different. It's impossible at this juncture to speak responsibly about Donald Trump and foreign policy, because we just don't know what this man's going to do.
Hey, Young Link, good morning to you. If I'm getting a Switch 2 at some point, I can't afford it right now. I don't know if you know, I live in Jamaica, so it's a total different life out here. And I'm going to be 48 years old this year, so it's not like back in the old days and stuff like that. Hence why I passed the torch to C&D, because I can't sustain that Nintendo life that I used to have and whatnot. I have to focus on my wife and her family and other things that I got going on that are far more important than the Switch 2. So yeah, will I get it eventually at some point, hopefully? But will I get it on launch? Nah. Let me see what some dude says. Triforce. What do you think? Oh yeah, that's why I don't want to be a politician. Oh no, no. If you become a politician, someone owns you. Because I could get killed. Well, you could get killed for anything, bro. And yeah, you're right, Kisan. He dodged 3 or 4 bullets so far. My man is on some Neo Matrix shit right now. He bullet time. That's what he's on. He's on his bullet time jump off. Back to the news.
Yeah. Professor Morandi, Donald Trump called the Iranian negotiators as intelligent. And what does he mean? And what is the outcome of the latest talks between Iran and the United States? We know that the foreign minister of Iran said that was difficult but useful. What does that mean to you?
It's very difficult to say, Nima. On the one hand, as we were discussing earlier, Witkoff, right before the latest round, he made some statements that were unacceptable to the Iranians. The Iranian foreign minister responded, basically saying that if this continues, that we're going to go make similar public statements as well. And then right after the negotiations, we see Trump making this sort of statement and others making similar statements, which raise questions. If Witkoff was insisting at the negotiating table, well, they're indirect talks, of course, but if Witkoff was insisting that there's going to be no enrichment, then I think that that would have led to the talks ending, or at least the two sides would have just been sending messages back and forth that would not change anything. So possibly Witkoff at the in Oman was not saying the same thing that he was saying to Breitbart, and that he was being more flexible but difficult. I'm just guessing. This is, the taxi driver outside, driving by our house. His guess is as good as mine. But my guess would be that Witkoff is what he's saying in Oman is not the exact thing that he said to Breitbart.
Can I just jump in with my taxi cab version of this? Imagine me being a Iranian cab driver right now. First of all, don't get in my cab because I don't know the city well enough and we'll just get lost. But if you want to ask me about the nuclear I would say this. The third round, one of the interesting ways that it was described was that they were beginning to have technical discussions. You don't have technical discussions about broad policy issues. Technical discussions come when you start talking about brass tacks in terms of monitoring regime of a nuclear enrichment program. And Witkoff was part of that. This happened before he made the statements. And when they left the third round, both sides were optimistic. They're like, okay, things are happening. Then Witkoff said what he said. I think that's because Trump came under a lot of pressure from Israel. And I think that Witkoff's statements were directly linked to the Israeli government's posture. Now that Trump's had his spat with Netanyahu, we're now moving into a fourth round of negotiations. And again, the technical aspect is very much part of this. So, and I think Witkoff has come out and said some things just this morning where he said that the key thing is that Iran will not have a nuclear weapons program. That's saying that Iran will have a nuclear energy program, a nuclear enrichment program. So I think that the Trump administration has made decisions that say, no, we are going to have a deal, if a deal can be finalized, that's premised on Iran retaining nuclear enrichment. Now, once you accept that, that's the big hurdle for the United States. Now it comes down to how do we build a nuclear enrichment program that gives Iran what it wants while providing political cover from us, meaning that so that we can go out and explain to people how this is not a nuclear weapons program. And that's where they're at right now. That's complicated. It's difficult. But that ain't nearly as difficult as overcoming that first hurdle, because as Professor Morandi said, if the going in position of the United States is no enrichment, then there is no need to further these discussions. So obviously, I believe the United States, Steve Witkoff, has made a decision that we are looking for a deal that includes enrichment. And I'm very, very, very pleased by this, because this is exactly what needs to happen to resolve this issue. But let's look at Russia. Witkoff came out of discussions with the Russians saying, I fully understand the Russian position. I understand what the Russians are talking about in terms of territory. I understand we know what the Russian position is. And believe me, Professor Morandi makes it out clear that the Iranian position is non-negotiable. The Russian position is equally non-negotiable. And so when Witkoff comes in and tells the president what the Russian position is and reflects the reality that it's non-negotiable, and then the president turns around and allows Steve Kellogg to articulate things that are the exact opposite of what the Russian position is, and imply that that is American policy. When the president speaks about Europe as if the European disagreements with Russia are valid and carry weight, that means that whatever Witkoff said, whatever he negotiated, already discussed with the Russians, doesn't matter in the mind of the man-child, which means that whatever Witkoff comes out of in these discussions with Iran, they could come out with the perfect deal. In fact, I have enough faith and confidence in Steve Witkoff and his Iranian counterparts that they can craft a deal that is workable. Can the man-child accept this? Can he withstand the criticism? That's always going to be the big question, not the quality of the deal. The deal is going to be a good deal if they can finish this. The question is, what is the man-child going to do when people start attacking him? Is he going to throw a temper tantrum, start crying, start complaining to mommy, and then say, no, I reject that. I'm taking my ball and I'm going home.
Yeah.
I agree with Scott that, by the way, that the Russians are not going to give any serious concessions to the West. But if Trump on day one had made the decision to accept President Putin's demands, President Putin could have made it easier for him on smaller issues to make it easier for him to convince the public, even though he had a mandate back then, and he could have done it anyway. But he could have given him something to make it easier. But now, what's probably going to happen is that we're going to have a war where the Russians go further and perhaps go all the way to Odessa. And if there is going to be a deal, it's going to be more difficult for Trump to convince the public, the elites, because he's lost that momentum, and the Russians are going to make bigger demands, because if they take more territory and they lose more men, and then they go back to the negotiating table, it's not going to be like what it was a few weeks ago or a couple of months ago. There are a number of things here that I find interesting, but I don't have any. They don't necessarily help me reach a conclusion. Possibly one of the reasons why we see that this round of negotiations has been more positive than expected, which again doesn't mean that we're going to have a deal, but at this stage it seems to, because a lot of people were saying, well, after what Witkoff said, then there's not going to be any progress, may have to do with the fact that Trump is deeply irritated or angry with Netanyahu, or even further than that as Scott is implying. But then again, if that changes, that could mean that U.S. policy with regards to the negotiations would change too. So it's unclear. Again, it goes back to what I was saying about China. Trump basically, when he made this move, everyone was wondering. It was a very daring move, in my opinion, a very foolish move, but a very daring move. But he retreated, very. No one was expecting this agreement to take place with the Chinese so swiftly. Everyone was saying, well, they're going to speak, and then we'll have to see what happens. And then we saw, they literally announced a deal. Well, not a provisional deal, or a deal of sorts, because they, as I said, they went back to where they were before Liberation Day, and this is going to be a 3-month process, and who knows what's going to happen then. But the point is that this does show, as I said earlier, that Trump is flexible. China, for example, the Ansarullah. And it does show possibly that his flexibility towards Ansarullah, Hamas, and Iran is possible, and that it may be linked to Netanyahu. It probably is linked to his relationship with Netanyahu, but I can't say for certain. But all of this can be reversed, just like the talks with China can be reversed. Just like Russia, we already seen that they've been reversed. Russia, the war in Ukraine had a solution. And now we are miles away from that solution. And we may not have a solution anytime soon. This year may be a year of war. And again, who knows? Maybe Trump will shift course on Ukraine tomorrow. It's so confusing. And it makes me more cautious than ever before to talk about anything, because I'd always get things wrong. And now I'm sure I'm going to get things wrong. But the war in Ukraine is, for me at this stage, a very bad sign of what can happen, because it was it could have had a good, decent ending, and now it's going to possibly have a very bloody ending. On the other hand, you have China, which was going to lead us to a global economic catastrophe, which we still are going to see the consequences in the coming weeks, according to economists. But he was able to shift policy and decrease the damage. Who knows what's going to happen with the nuclear program? Is it going to go down the Ukraine-Russia road, or is it going to go down the U.S.-China road? Which all of these could change, by the way, tomorrow. But what I'm saying is that we're seeing a lot of unpredictability, and things that we were hoping or expecting to happen did not happen. It did not materialize in Ukraine. And things that we did not expect to turn in a positive way, at least with China, it did happen. So what does that mean for the nuclear deal? The good news is that the Iranian side knows the details of the nuclear program. And I'm sure, I don't know who Trump is using or who Witkoff is using for his negotiations. The nuclear program has been negotiated many times. Most recently, it was negotiated in depth between Dr. Valkyries, who was the deputy foreign minister and head of the file, and they almost had a deal with the P4+1, with the Americans, guiding the Europeans from behind in Vienna. We almost had a deal. Dr. Arochi was the deputy of Dr. Zarif. He knows exactly what's going on. So even though there's a lot of details and there are lots of complexities, if the two sides want to have a deal, and I'm sure the Iranians want to, within the framework of their principles, if there is the will to have a deal, it is achievable more swiftly than before, because everything is known. All the routes have been explored. All the debates have taken place in the past. So it doesn't have to be something that goes on for many months and just drag on. And so that is the good news. But the problem is that for Trump, it can be hours, literally hours. On Truth Social, he says something and everything changes.
I'll just throw this in there. I think the good news for the Iranian program is that Iran has mature leadership that is sincerely looking out for the vested interest of the Iranian nation, the Iranian people, and that they recognize that war or a path towards war is not a solution, that finding a path towards peace is the solution. And so I think they'll be far more tolerant of the inconsistencies of the American Trump administration. And I say the same thing about China. Very mature leadership. They don't want a devastating trade war with the United States. That doesn't meet China's goals and objectives at all. And I think the Chinese are going to show a lot more maturity and patience with the tempestuous nature of Trump. Russia has shown extreme patience with Trump. The problem, though, is that Trump isn't dealing with Russia alone. You have Zelensky, who is just a failure of a leader who doesn't care about his people and is negotiating as a tool of Europe. And Europe is in a very compromised position where they are committed to the strategic defeat of Russia, and they're not willing to back down from that position, even though it's unattainable. They're committing.
I thought when you meant compromise, you were talking about the train issue.
I mean, if the European media is not going to go crazy about, the possibility of their senior leadership stimulating themselves artificially, then maybe that's the norm in Europe. I don't know, but the fact is, Europe is not a partner in this process. Europe is a disruptor, and Trump has allowed Europe. Trump could have cut Europe out in a heartbeat. I mean, just sliced them right off and said, "You're just not a factor in any of this." But Trump has brought them in and allowed them to inject themselves. Even today, as before we came on, I still have to figure out what it meant. But Kellogg is now saying, "Yeah, America may support the deployment of European troops into Ukraine." What part of dead European troops don't you understand? And this is why Kellogg should be permanently silenced or fired. Let him, if he wants to speak, let him go on Fox News as a private citizen and say what Steve Kellogg wishes would happen. But as long as he's a special envoy, I mean, this directly contradicts what Donald Trump has already said on this issue. It directly contradicts what the Secretary of Defense has said on this issue. And now Steve Kellogg's out there articulating policy at a very critical time. Do you want to sabotage any potential of a peace negotiation? Say that it's America's position that Europeans, once you get this magical, mythical 30-day ceasefire, that European peacekeepers will deploy west of the Dnieper River. Russia will say, no, they won't. Therefore, there won't be. It's sabotaging this. This is why I think this is deliberate by Trump. He is afraid of getting the peace that could happen because it requires him to concede to Russia things that once they're conceded will open him up for attack in Europe and here at the United States. And Trump isn't man enough to take that attack. A true leader would absorb that attack, go on national TV and explain to the American people why he did what he did. Trump is a man-child, and a man-child can just have a temper tantrum and run to his room and hide. That's Donald Trump, and that's why there won't be peace in Ukraine. And I agree with Professor Miranda. If you want to ask me to commit to this, nothing will come out of Istanbul on Thursday except this: the Russians will leave knowing there is no path towards peace. This is such a clarifying moment for the Russians and a necessary moment for the Russians. And again, I don't want to predict the future, but if I were the Russians, I would come back from that and say, since there is no path for peace, what we're seeing is the United States and Europe and Ukraine buying time to rebuild military capacity to put us in a weakened position, that we have never been stronger than we are right now. So right now is the moment to exploit our strength and change the strategic dynamic of this conflict by maybe transitioning from a special military operation to an active state of war that puts Kiev under the firing line, etc. But do something to break this paradigm that exists right now. Russia is winning a war of attrition, but a war of attrition is a very bloody thing for both sides. Russia's winning, but it's sustainability over time, especially if the United States and Europe are trying to, boost Ukrainian killing capacity. Why would Russia want to do that? So I think Russia is going to leave this with more clarity about what needs to be done. And I think this summer we're going to see the nature of the conflict in Ukraine change dramatically. It'll be horrible. It'll be bloody. It will be awful. But it's the only way Russia is going to bring an end to this conflict. This war will end on terms dictated to Ukraine by Russia, and the United States and NATO will be outside looking in. We're not going to be a part of how this conflict terminates.
So if we take Scott's logic and put it to what's going on in the region, I agree. I think the way things are going, Russia will have no option but to mobilize, and it's already mobilized. It's preparing itself for a summer offensive. They will probably take a very different route. They will hit hard and they will start pressing forward, and that could break the back, or probably will break the back of the Ukrainian army, but the casualties will be huge. It will be very, very bloody. And it will be like an earthquake for European politics and for the world, because and this could have been stopped. It could have been prevented 2-3 months ago. But if we take this logic and come back to the region, that should make us very cautious about the future, because if the Europeans and Zelensky and the deep state, let's call it the deep state in Europe and the United States, don't want peace in Ukraine, then imagine how the neocons, Zionists, Netanyahu, and these forces will be working to undermine any degree of rapprochement between Iran and the United States, any decreasing intentions, because ultimately the problem in the region between Iran and the United States is not about the nuclear program, it's not about terrorism, it's not about human rights, it's not about children's rights, it's not about global warming, it's about Israel. And so the nuclear program is one of the key tools used by Iran's antagonists, Iran's opponents, to put pressure on the country because of Iran's support for the Palestinian cause. You don't see Turkey sanction, you don't see Doha or Qatar sanction, you don't see any of these countries sanctioned, because none of them are really the governments are sincerely working to the detriment of the Israeli regime, or in maybe to the detriment of politician, but not to the regime itself. Iran has been targeted and put under maximum pressure and maximum sanctions and threatened and antagonized, and regime change operations have been carried out and terrorist attacks have been carried out because of Israel. So when you have this degree of antagonism, then the negotiations that take place in Oman, or with Oman present, and if it's at an Omani embassy somewhere in Europe, they're very vulnerable. And the same is true with the ceasefire between the United States and Ansarullah and the Yemeni armed forces too. And the same is true with regards to Hamas. I think Scott alluded to this earlier, that yes, it is a big shift that the United States is directly negotiating with Hamas. This time around, they didn't back off, or they didn't back down when the Israelis found out and started putting pressure on them. But that doesn't mean that the United States next week is going to continue down the road of this, what appears to be some sort of policy change. It could just simply be a blip on the radar. We don't know. I personally believe, though, this is the only prediction that I can make. I think that the United States is going to continue to decline. I think the way in which the trade war is being engineered is to the detriment of the United States. I think, although Trump made a smart move to retreat, but I think that the momentum he's put things into motion across the world that will not be good for the United States. The fact that China was able to force Trump to go to the day before Liberation Day is going to embolden all those countries who are going to sit down with Americans and negotiate over tariffs, because all of them will see that China literally got what it wanted, so now we can do the same. They're going to be able, they're going to have more cards to play with than China did, I think, because of what China did. On the other hand, the war in Ukraine is going to have very negative consequences for the United States and for Europe. It's going to be very bad and very bloody if they don't quickly shift gear. So this year is going to be a very important year, 2025. And I think that Iran, while it is going to hope for the best and work for the best, but it's going to be preparing itself for the worst. Iran is going to, as my understanding is that Iran is preparing itself for some sort of military confrontation with the United States. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. I'm not saying that, but it is preparing itself. I don't believe there's going to be war between Iran and the United States. The United States does not have that ability. The world has changed. The United States would have to bring in 1.5 million people, 1990, that sort of thing, but much bigger. But the world has changed. The U.S. economy has changed. Iran has changed. Everything has changed. Iran's relations. Soon, we now hear that the Russian President Putin, is coming to Iran. The Iranian president is going to go on a state visit to China shortly, and then he's going to go there again for I think the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Things have changed, and so in the region, the Israelis, they're much diminished. I'm not saying they're going to fall apart tomorrow, but they're much diminished. Things are not looking good for the United States economically, militarily, public diplomacy wise. When it comes to Gaza, the world blames the West. This year is going to be a very key year, I think, in contemporary history, because so many things are in play. But the Iranians are preparing themselves. The Iranians are not going to be the ones to leave the negotiating table. They will, even though it's in direct talks, but the negotiating table is something that the Iranians are sitting at for two reasons. One is in the hope that there will be a deal, a decent deal where Iran's rights are respected and Iran will continue with its peaceful nuclear program, and there will be a decrease in tensions. But the second path is confrontation, or at least a continuation of what we have today, where Trump constantly threatens Iran. But I think there is also a possibility of the United States carrying out strikes against Iran, which I think would not end well for the United States. I don't think it will end well for Israel. But Trump could be pushed into doing this. Who knows? After all, he murdered General Soleimani, and I think I've never really heard the story, but ever since he said that Netanyahu pulled out at the last moment and that sort of thing, the first time I heard that, I think it for me it was clear that the Israeli regime pushed him into, and this is something that could happen again in future. So again, sorry, I mean, all I've been saying during this hour or so of the discussion is I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. But I think Iran is going to continue to negotiate until we get a deal, or until the United States chooses to discontinue with the negotiation.
Yeah, Nima, you need to name this program. I don't know, because I think that's the mutual conclusion is when it comes to Trump, I don't know. Who does? Not even Trump. Not even
I don't
Trump
think Trump knows. I agree 100%. I do not think that the people around Trump can predict what he's going to do, and I don't think Trump knows what he's going to do.
No.
I'm not saying he's completely mad. I'm not saying it's complete chaos, but I do think that's who he is. I don't think he knows what he's going to do. I think this is not strategic uncertainty as they like to say it. I do think it is chaos. Now, whether it's the what some have said, and Scott alluded to, that whether it's the last person who speaks to him has the greatest influence, I don't know how it works. I'm sure it's many things together. But whatever it is, when whatever these factors are that make Trump who he is and what he is, it just makes it very difficult to predict the future. But one thing, as I said earlier, and I'm repeating myself, but I think it's important. One thing that it will do for certain is that it will make countries think about their relationships with one another without the United States.
Yep.
This is going to strengthen the bond between Iran and Russia, Russia and China. It is even going to raise questions in capitals of countries like India about the United States. Because if you don't know what the person who you're dealing with is going to do tomorrow, that makes it better for you to think about at least having other options too. And I would like to add, even though this is not being discussed, this brief conflict between India and Pakistan, which I hope never happens again, because war is not to the benefit of either side. Both sides have, their media has been saying a lot of nonsense and exaggerating. The only thing that came out of this, I don't think the Indians did much damage to Pakistan. I don't think the Pakistanis did much damage to the Indians. In fact, I think both of them were exaggerating, and they were being careful, even though people were killed. But what did come out of this is that Chinese military products have shown themselves to be better than people thought, and that they did better than the French and European weapons that were being used by India. And I think that too is something that people are going to calculate in the months in, just like DeepSeek. We were being told that, yeah, the Chinese can make good cell phones and they can do this, but the creativity is in the United States. And then suddenly I use DeepSeek. I don't use anything else. I mean, they're better than the other ones for the time being. So DeepSeek changed and the perception of many, and of course it caused a huge fall in the stock market in the United States. But I think that while the fact that these French jets, advanced jets, were down by not so new Chinese jets and missiles, I think that is significant as well. And all of these combined, what's happening in Ukraine, the genocide in Gaza, the ongoing genocide in Gaza, the trade war, not just with China but with the world, and the fact that China has emerged as capable. We lost Nima. The fact that China has emerged technologically capable, not just in AI, but with regards to its military defense capabilities. I think this is all going to have to be factored in, and will be factored in by politicians across the world.
Yep.
Scott, you're going to have to
I guess
on.
I gotta pretend that I'm Nima. There, Nima's back. Okay.
Yeah. Nima, we hijacked your show. We're going to call it the Scott Mohammed Show, but
We're done. We've concluded. We solved. Actually, we came up with global solutions and we articulated it quite well.
Yeah, you missed it all.
Yeah.
You
I
missed
think
it all.
by the way, I think, Scott, what Professor Marandi just said is so much important for the foreign policy of the United States. He mentioned Vladimir Putin going to be in Iran, talking with Iranian leadership, and Iranian president going to China. I would wonder, what would that mean for the United States in the Middle East? Do they really want to be on the part of Israel? Do they really want to reconsider their policy in the long term? This is huge. And what's happening right now between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and what's going on, it's so much important, in my opinion, in the eyes of Donald Trump and his administration. How is that going to be perceived by the United States, in your opinion?
Well, when you say the United States, who are you talking about? The American people, the American Congress, the establishment, the Trump administration, the president? How are we defining the United States? Because there's different levels of perception and perspectives. I don't think the American people understand what's happening to them. I don't think the United States understands where we are. I will always advocate very strongly for the United States, and I've tried to be, reality based in my approach. Even under Joe Biden, who I criticized vociferously, I believe that the United States was a relevant nation, in many ways, the relevant nation in the world on many issues. So even when nations disagreed with us, they had no choice but to deal with us, that they had to take in the American perspective, and their leaders had to fly to the United States or agree to meet with the United States. But the man-child has made America irrelevant. I mean, we really have just taken ourselves out of the running when it comes to, the major issues of the day. Saudi Arabia is hosting the American president, I believe, not because the president is there to save Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia is saying we have to do something to prop this guy up because he's collapsing, and we don't want to live in a world where we have a geopolitical vacuum created by the rapid withdrawal of the United States as a relevant player on the global stage, which is what Trump is doing. Trump is forcing the issues, and these retreats that he's doing makes America irrelevant. We could have been the most relevant player in the Ukrainian-Russia deal. We could have made ourselves absolutely essential to that. What's going to happen instead is that we are going to withdraw, and Russia is going to be the only voice heard on this issue, which creates a vacuum in Europe. The deficit of American leadership requires Europe to come up with its own solution without America. We could be if we were more assertive with Israel, we could be the defining voice. But by backing out and letting Netanyahu do things, he fills that vacuum. We become irrelevant. I'm afraid that's what we're doing. So the Saudis, being the very pragmatic people they are, I mean, what was the first deal they came up with? Giving Trump a victory. We're sending $600 billion. We're going to invest $600 billion in America. Now Trump gets to go, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. I got $600 billion in from the Saudis. I'm awesome. I'm the man child. America loves me. And then what else that comes out of this? Nothing. Nothing. He's not going to get what he wants on global oil prices. He's not going to get the Saudis to divorce their relationship with Iran. He's not going to get the Saudis to back off their relationship with China. He's not going to get the Saudis to back off of anything. The Saudis are there to make the president look good and give him, something to help prop him up because they don't want a geopolitical vacuum. America under Donald Trump is becoming irrelevant. And that's not a good thing for the world. And again, I think, to be frank, I think the Iranians recognize this, which is why the Iranians are bending over backwards to, stay at the negotiating table. Because as bad as an inconsistent Trump is, America has been the dominant player in the world for decades, the dominant player. The world's not ready to operate without an America out there playing a prominent role, not a dominant role, but a prominent role. Trump is in the process of even eliminating that possibility. He's making America irrelevant. And this is a dangerous situation for a number of reasons. One, the world's not ready to operate in that environment. Two, there still is a need for American leadership. And three, having a man-child throw a temper tantrum when he has his button on the nuclear, the finger capable of pushing the nuclear button is not a solution any wants. The instability that's engendered by the inconsistency of the Trump administration is one of the greatest threats to international peace and security today.
Professor Marandi, do you believe that Russia and China are in the process of being more active, making more substantial decisions about the Middle East? How do they see Middle East, in your opinion, right now? Has their mind changed during the past, let's say, 4 years or 3 years?
I think it's more than just Russia and China. I think it's what's happened over the last 19 months is has changed the way the world perceives the United States, the West, and the Israeli regime. Even inside the United States, you have some key supporters of Trump hitting out at AIPAC, at Israel. You have a key congresswoman. You have key whether it's Candace Owens or who's very hard hitting on the Israeli regime. And you have hosts of people nowadays. Just I think hours ago, Tucker Carlson. I didn't watch it, but he did another show which was highly, I would assume, is highly critical of uh, the Israeli regime and Israeli supporters. And uh, this is huge. You see small signs, accumulating across Europe of change in mentality. You see the Financial Times. Uh, you see the New York Times printing things that they wouldn't do. So I'm not saying that the things are, there's going to be a sea change, but things are changing, and that is, Russia's role and China's role in the region and across the world is going to change as well. So as the United States continues to sacrifice itself for the sake of its the elites, whether it's the deep state or the elites in Europe or Zelensky or whatever, as it continues to sacrifice itself for the Israeli regime, as it continues to make foolish moves in with regards to the trade war, which I understand some of the reasons why they want to put tariffs in place. It's because the United States no longer produces anything, but it's something that has been done over the last 40 years. It's not going to be reversed in 4 months or 4 years. And also, there's this sort of paradox with the dollar. On the one hand, Trump wants it to remain the reserve currency, but I think one reason why the United States can't be competitive at home is because of the dollar being the global reserve currency. So the United States is in this terrible position, and as it declines and or Scott says becomes irrelevant, or at least relatively speaking, less relevant, I think that it's inevitable that China and Russia and Iran and other major players are going to uh, fill in that space. But that, as empires, as we've read in history books and as we've heard from people who've read history well, as empires decline, they become more uh, aggressive. They become more irrational. They become more hostile, and the speed in which this empire is declining is unprecedented in world history. Usually, in the past, it would take centuries. In the case of the UK, depending on how you define it, it took a century at least. But in the case of the United States, it's largely because of its own goals, or at least partially. It's going down very fast, and who knows what that could lead to? It could lead to a very dangerous situation.
Scott, do you want to add something before wrapping up?
No, I think Professor Morandi and I are of one mind here. So,
Yeah. Thank you so much, Scott and Professor Morandi, for being with us today. Great pleasure.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks. I hate beating. I just have to say this. I have to say this on record. I hate beating up on my country. I really do. I love my country. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes to imagine how much I love my country. And I want my country to succeed, not at the expense of others, but I want my country to succeed. I want the American people to thrive, to prosper, and I want us to live up to our potential as a nation. We are a good people. We are a productive people. We are an intelligent people. We are a moral people. And we are floundering. We are failing. But when you invite me on and you ask me questions, I'm going to give you an honest answer. But I have to say that this program, no matter how much smile I put on my face, this program hurt me deeply. It pains me to have a program like this because, to be honest, requires to say things that are critical of my country, that every time I say them, it hurts because it's the truth. It's the reality. And it's not the America I want it to be. It's not the America it should be. But I just wanted to say that because I think I try to cover my pain with some frivolity, with some humor, and with good spirit. But this program hurt me deeply. It really did. It pains me. This is a very painful time for me to watch, as Professor Morandi said, the rapid decline of a country I love.
Well, let's hope for better days for everyone across the globe, and an end to the genocide and to
Yeah.
ethnic cleansing, and a more just global system, and better days for all people: Americans, Iranians, Russians, Europeans, Africans, Asians, Latin people from across Latin America. Hopefully, hopefully our children will see better days.
We just got to get rid of the man child, but we have 3 more years.
Well, I think we have to get rid of a lot of
A
men
lot of
children.
things. Yeah. We'll start with the man child. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure.
See you. Take care.
Bye.
Israeli soldiers operate with such a level of impunity that they think they can, for a laugh or for a light, they can actually publish online their own crimes. What's happened with the genocide in Gaza is the fact that it is a genocide, and therefore the crimes are so egregious that are being carried out. The attempt to cover them up and whitewash them, as has been done for a very long time, is failing. You're quoting a state that is, at the very least, you just said, accused of genocide.
By drawing daily sketches, you can develop discipline, improve your skills, and foster new ideas. It serves to relieve stress.
Okay, we got a new one. Let's see what's next up on the program.
Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Tuesday, May 13th, 2025. Colonel McGregor, welcome here, sir. Before we get to broader issues of war and peace and what the United States seems to be spending and has spent most of its time propagating, I want to address some very contemporary issues. President Trump is in Saudi Arabia as we speak. Why is he there?
I think that's an important question. I think, first of all, he wants to repair relations with the Saudis. As you know, we have a long, long relationship with Saudi Arabia. It goes back decades. And it's been a rough time lately. The Biden administration certainly did no favors for us with Saudi Arabia. And I think President Trump respects them and wants their goodwill. Now, I don't know how that's going to work, but I think that's his ultimate goal. It's not so much, well, I'm here to sell you more military equipment, although I'm sure that will come up. And I suspect the Saudis will probably buy some. But I think it's more along the lines of let's recognize that the last years have been difficult. The last few months have been hard, and that's over. I think that's what he wants to tell the Saudis. How they will receive that, who knows?
And at the same time, is it, since he's not going to Israel, a slap in the face to Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Yeah, I think you have to see it in those terms, but let's be frank. And no one, and I mean no one in the international community, and that may also be true for many people in Israel, who've had to deal with Mr. Netanyahu have liked the man. Most of them regard him as an arrogant sociopath. And given what's happened in Gaza, he may well deserve the title of psychopath. So at this point, I don't think it costs President Trump very much at home with his enormous followers in the Jewish community and donors to make it clear that he's unhappy with the behavior of Mr. Netanyahu. Now, beyond that, I don't think we should reach any conclusions. So I think he's just simply said to the Saudis, and I think he'll say the same thing in the Emirates, let's let bygones be bygones. Whether or not that works, I don't know.
It appears that Trump is getting so sick and tired of Netanyahu, whether it's personality or whether it's the destruction in Gaza and the advancement of the Greater Israel Project, that the prime minister had to take to the airwaves to deny it. Here he is earlier today in Israel. Chris, cut number 8.
This is a very emotional moment. Eden Alexander has returned home. We embrace him and we embrace his family. This was achieved thanks to our military pressure and the diplomatic pressure applied by President Trump. This is a winning combination. I spoke with President Trump today. He told me, I am committed to Israel. I am committed to continuing to work with you in close cooperation in order to achieve all of our war objectives, releasing all of the hostages and defeating Hamas. This goes together. They are combined with each other.
Hard for me to believe that Trump said that and used those words, but Netanyahu obviously felt the need to articulate it. How does that strike you?
I've been disturbed ever since I learned that Mr. Alexander was an Israeli from New Jersey. I thought everybody from New Jersey was an American. I thought it was very strange.
Yeah.
And clearly it was a slight. And Mr. Netanyahu, despite his arrogance, is very, very sensitive, much like Mr. Trump.
Yeah. The young man was born not far from where I live in New Jersey. But somehow, I guess, can you join the IDF without becoming an Israeli citizen? I don't know what the Israeli law is, but he was in the IDF when he was captured.
Well, for many years, we had laws in the books that said that if you served in the armed forces of another state, you lost your citizenship. If you voted in an election in a foreign state, you lost your citizenship. Then there was a Supreme Court ruling in 1965, with which you may be more familiar than I am, that overturned that. I'm someone who's never been comfortable with the idea of multiple citizenships. Either you are an American or you are not. And that was the view of the founders. And I tend to subscribe to that view.
How does the American military feel about Congressman Mast, M-A-S-T of Florida, who wears an IDF uniform on the floor of the House of Representatives?
I don't know what people, think today inside the United States Armed Forces. I know what I thought, and I think most of us, at least when I was serving, and that's up until 2004, and even in the years that followed, were very uncomfortable with people who were loyal to something other than the United States.
Right.
So I'd be surprised if people welcome that kind of thing. But obviously, if you have a lot of Jewish constituents and you're looking for donors from that community, that's a very good trick to play.
Right. Last issue before we get to bigger pictures. This plane from Qatar. I mean, did they give away $400 million and expect nothing in return?
Oh, of course not. There's no such thing in politics, as you know, Judge. If you give up something, you expect reciprocity. There's no doubt. And listen, we've had lots of evidence, and this is what I kind of regard as legalized corruption. Lots of evidence for the Kushners and the Trumps and Witkoff and so forth, all doing business on the side with Qatar and profiting from it enormously. It's the sort of thing that the right complained about with Hunter Biden. Well, we see some of the same sort of thing going on right now. I find it distasteful, and I think it's in bad form, and I think it's probably illegal. But I don't see any evidence that anywhere is going to do anything about it.
Does Trump have a realistic grasp of the slaughter in Gaza and the efforts by Prime Minister Netanyahu to expand the borders of Israel?
If he doesn't, then he's a co-conspirator in what is obviously mass murder. If he hasn't figured out that the Greater Israel Project is a suicidal path for the Israeli people and their state, then he's missing the boat completely. This notion that somehow or another you can arbitrarily state that there are vast stretches of other people's countries that belong to you, and then you state that you're going to physically seize them, ostensibly because they have the backing of the United States, should be regarded as very distasteful by President Trump. Maybe he's waking up to that. But why he would have ever supported any of it to begin with is the real question.
I just wonder where you think all of this is going. The slaps at Netanyahu, the negotiating directly with Hamas, the statements by the uber Zionist Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, that we're going to supply, this is the opposite of what he said 2 weeks ago, we're going to supply humanitarian aid and we don't need Israel's permission. The sending of the B-52s home, the cessation of the bombing of Yemen. What is the message from Trump to Netanyahu?
Well, remember that President Trump has this habit of flipping back and forth between different poles and different points of view. We discussed that in the past. On the one hand, he recognizes Russia's legitimate security interests. He recognizes that they are not responsible for this terrible war, that we, in fact, pushed this whole regime in Kyiv to fight this war. So then he takes a 180-degree turn and starts repeating the popular neocon slogans that Russia wants all of Ukraine and threatens Eastern Europe, and we get this sort of stupid warmed-over domino theory, which has absolutely no application. So when you turn to the Middle East, I think we have to be very careful. This is what he's saying now. Since there is no long-term strategic framework that we can follow, no coherent strategy, then I think we have to be careful and scale back our expectations. What he's saying and doing at this point could, in fact, within a week or 2 weeks, change.
Right. It's very frustrating, the continual moving back and forth. Here's what his present, this is a little funny, here's what his present Secretary of State said about Donald Trump and his views on Palestine when they were competing for the Republican nomination for president in 2016. Number 10.
He's not going down.
He thinks the Palestinian is a real estate deal.
And these people may even be tougher than Chris Christie, okay?
The Palestinians are not a real estate deal, Donald.
Okay, no. A deal,
They're not a real estate deal.
Is a deal. Let me tell you,
a deal is not a deal when you're dealing with terrorists. Have you ever negotiated with terrorists?
You are not a negotiator. And with your thinking, you will never bring peace. You will never bring peace.
Donald might be able to build condos in the Palestinian areas, but he's not going to. This is not a real estate deal.
Senator.
Well, he's been saying he wants to be able to bring peace since that time, and yet he's funding the slaughter.
Well, if you know absolutely nothing about the region, about the people involved, the culture, the history, the geography, then I suppose you could make statements along the lines of what President Trump made. As much as it disturbs me to say so, I find myself in agreement with current Secretary of State Rubio, who then said this is not a real estate deal. This, I think, has been the bottom line difficulty for President Trump. He views everything as transactional and views everything as a negotiation with a transactional outcome. And he tends to fall back on his experience as a real estate mogul in New York City. And those things do not necessarily transfer easily to the international system. There's no basis for expecting the rest of the world to see everything through that distorting lens. So I think in this case, Mr. Rubio is right. He's still right. And I hope that President Trump has finally concluded that. But again, I don't know, Judge. I mean, I like the man, and I like many of his views, particularly domestic perspective, but this is just impossible to follow with any certainty.
Do you think he has a realistic understanding of Iran? Do you think he recognizes that Iran poses zero national security threat to the United States?
Well, the short answer is no. But he has an instinct. And this is something I've said before. Many of his instincts are good. And his instinct from the beginning was, we don't need to go to war with Iran, nor do we want to. Now, in his mind, he thinks there's, quote unquote, a deal to be made. Again, if you're an Iranian and you're watching this drama in Washington, D.C. play out, the question that you raise, and I think this is coming up all over the world. I think it's in Moscow and Beijing, everywhere. What's his position this week? We sign this today, and this will last till what? The midterm elections? In other words, how long does anything last? What's the evidence that we can bet on anything in the near term or the long term of the United States? What are the United States' real core interests? Are those core interests in the Persian Gulf? Are they in Israel? Are they in Ukraine? Most people look at this, shake their heads, and say, of course not. Our core interests are in the Western Hemisphere. But, what do you conclude? I don't think any of us can say with certainty what the answer to your question is.
Yeah. But I wonder if he contemplates what Netanyahu might do if Witkoff crafts another real estate developer purporting to be an international diplomat who seems to be the de facto, not de jure, because he wasn't confirmed by the Senate, the de facto Secretary of State. If they enter into an agreement with Iran that does permit the enrichment of uranium for energy means and hospital uses.
First, the Iranians have made it very clear that they are not abandoning their nuclear power capability, nor are they prepared to give up enrichment or anything else. They're certainly not going to give up their missile arsenal and their theater ballistic missile capabilities. I don't know how you reach an agreement that includes those things without deeply offending and alienating Mr. Netanyahu. So I think you're right to raise that question. The question is that then the trigger for Mr. Netanyahu to launch his Israeli-only attack on Iran? And perhaps we shouldn't exclude this. I would not exclude the possibility that the British and the French don't aid the Israelis. So even if we're not initially involved, they well could support him because they have strange interests in the region. The British especially, who meddled in the Middle East for centuries, they would like to gain control of Iran's oil and natural gas fields. And I think the French would eagerly jump into that as well. So I think there are other dangers, other things in play. So simply because we say we don't think so, doesn't mean it can't happen.
The United States intelligence community not only informed the president, but somehow informed the public, if they leaked it or what, of the conclusion that Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon. Netanyahu, to the contrary, notwithstanding. However, just the other day, my friends and former colleagues at Fox came up with a rather bizarre report. Chris, please use your judgment because it gets a little repetitive once we grasp what the hell they're saying. Watch this, Colonel.
Fox News exclusive satellite images revealing the location of a previously unknown Iranian nuclear site. Now, the facility spans nearly 2,500 acres, and this is a big discovery. Jillian Turner has more from the State Department. Good morning, Jillian.
Pretty explosive, Dana. These satellite images that we have obtained exclusively show the alleged site location and even the layout of the secret, previously unknown nuclear weapons facilities inside Iran.
Is this realistic?
I don't know. I mean, keep in mind, the Mossad and the CIA are uncomfortably close. Some people say they're joined at the hip. Clearly, the Mossad exercises a very pernicious and potentially dangerous influence inside the CIA. Could this be true? Well, of course it can be true. We have an expression in the Army: intelligence is always wrong. And that's not entirely out of character for what we're hearing now. Could there be something else? Absolutely. I mean, during this latest Indo-Pakistani conflict, we know that the Indians ostensibly or allegedly accidentally struck a nuclear storage site about which they claim they didn't know. That's one of the reasons the Pakistanis said, look, let's call a halt to this. It's possible. I can't confirm it one way or the other, but it's not impossible.
Well, you wonder if this is Colin Powell at the UN saying Saddam Hussein has WMDs. I mean, nobody else has come forward on this. The government hasn't commented on it. None of the other media picked it up. Switching gears slightly, but to something that is profound in my view, and I suspect in yours. Does the United States need a budget of its Defense Department in excess of $1 trillion a year?
The easy answer is no. Absolutely not. But again, if you define your national interests as inextricably intertwined with other people's wars and conflicts around the world, that there could be no safety in the United States until Iran is destroyed, that unless Russia is beaten to a pulp, there's no safety for U.S. interests in Europe, unless Taiwan is preserved in perpetuity and protected against the possibility of reunification with China, then the world as we know it will fall apart. That's the kind of talk and nonsense, as you know, Judge, that you'll hear from the Joint Chiefs, frequently from the intelligence services, all of which justifies this vastly bloated Defense Department bill. The other piece of it is it completely ignores the dramatic technological changes and advances that make most of our armed force today not entirely obsolete, but certainly less useful than it's ever been before. So why would you then pump hundreds of billions of dollars into the old force? It doesn't make any sense. But there has never been any willingness since 1991 on the Hill, under any circumstances, to entertain a fundamental change in strategy. Instead of saying NATO no longer serves its original purpose, we're backing down from command and control in NATO. We'll be supportive, but this should be a European-driven alliance with European interests at the forefront. We've said the opposite. We have to find new things for our European allies to do in places like the Middle East, or for that matter, anywhere else in the world we judge that we want to wage war or pursue a conflict. All of this is obfuscation. It needs to go away, but no one will stand up and tell the truth. Just bring in Senators Graham and Cotton, along with many others, and they'll tell you that's insane. We live on a hair trigger of a major global war. We can't spare a dime.
In the post-World War II era, is the United States more interested in killing people or in advancing peace? United States government.
I think it's very clear that the latter is not a top priority. In fact, I think the opposite is the case. People are looking for reasons to justify this enormous defense expenditure. That means that you've got to find places to go, places to become involved, and places to fight. And just look recently in Africa, we've been largely expelled from the continent by many different governments. And we thought Africa was this wonderful plane of opportunity where we could go in and fight Al-Qaeda or Al-Nusra or any number of branches of Islamists in perpetuity. And this is wonderful. It's crazy. The idea that perhaps the best thing we can do for most of the world is leave it alone, not interfere in it, is simply foreign to everybody in Washington.
Well, I hope that Donald Trump listens to the, I'll call them America Firsters, the non-neocons around him. I think it's about 2/3 neocon, the Tom Cottons and Lindsey Grahams and Sebastian Gorkas and Marco Rubios. And then there's Vice President Vance and Director Gabbard. Unfortunately, to a person, they are Zionists to the core. So that's going to bring us back to where we started the conversation, and we needn't repeat it. So I don't know how this is going to end up. I think you put your finger on it when you say Trump changes his mind all the time. It sounds like he believes whoever has been whispering into his ear last.
Well, I think there's a great deal of evidence for that. And I don't know how you fix that one. Keep in mind that I'm absolutely confident that President Trump wants to do what he thinks is in the best interest of the American people. Figuring out what the best interests are is for him very challenging. He spent his life in New York real estate. We all understand that. We've heard about it. I've read The Art of the Deal. We all know what he thinks. The problem is that none of that is relevant to these issues. In fact, it's not even relevant to many of the things that challenge us inside the country, not the least of which is the potential for a financial meltdown. And if you listen to the various financial analysts that the mainstream tries to ignore, although it's becoming more and more difficult, because you now have people like Mohammed El-Arian, who's a very respected and thoughtful financial analyst who runs or has been in charge of the London School of Economics. You've got many others here, whether it's James Ricards or Luke Roman or Alistair McLeod or any number of people that are experts in gold and these other things are all warning us categorically that we're in trouble. And even Mr. Besament has, I think, confided to the president that we just aren't bringing in any income to fund the government, which puts you in a very difficult state. He's now pursuing gold arbitrage to try and extract dollars so that we can fund ourselves. I don't know how much longer this goes on. So the notion of $1 trillion defense budget is not only farcical from the standpoint of threats to the United States, because most of the threats that concern us are in our own hemisphere. It's also dangerous, Judge. We can't afford it. It will sink us in our economy.
Colonel McGregor, thank you very much. Thanks for your insight on all of this. I think the overwhelming majority of this audience truly appreciate what you're saying and agree with what you've articulated. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again next week.
Okay, Judge. Nice to see you.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. And coming up later today at 3 o'clock on
Yeah, we got Scott Ritter again with Judge Apolitano, so let's go. Oh shit. That's a good one. I'm actually gonna check that one out.
Feel good.
Can Trump resist the neocons with whom he surrounded himself?
Well, I mean, that's a fair question, ultimately. When we take a look at the composition of Donald Trump's cabinet and his closest advisory bodies, we see a split between what I'll call the MAGA thinkers. These are people who have broken with the neoconservative policies of the past, who believe that the United States must chart a new course forward. These are people like J.D. Vance, like Tulsi Gabbard, like Steve Witkoff, this surprising name that's appeared out of nowhere to become, literally the top diplomat of the United States. These three people are very pragmatic, realistic, and they seem to be supportive of Trump's, stated agenda of avoiding war, seeking peace. But Trump has also surrounded himself with an entire team of neoconservatives. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is the most neoconservative of neoconservatives, and now he is double-hatted as the national security advisor of the United States. This is constitutionally questionable. And it's just not good policy. But, Mike Waltz, who was a neoconservative, got caught conspiring behind Donald Trump's back, apparently, with the Israelis. Steve Kellogg is there. The Secretary of Treasury is a neoconservative. And so these are people who are pushing for very hardline policies, people who seem to support Israel's posture vis-a-vis Iran, Israel's insistence of no nuclear enrichment whatsoever, which would kill any prospect for peace. These are people who continue to breathe life into Zelensky, into the Europeans, and into bringing an end to the Ukraine conflict in a way that doesn't really end the conflict, just buys Ukraine time to rearm, re-equip, and be prepared to fight this in 5 years. So Donald Trump, I think he's a man who, I used to work for a boss who I was told, you need to be the last person to brief him during the day. And sure enough, everybody knew this. At the end of the day, if you're trying to get something done, you lined up outside of his office and you waited until you could sneak in to be the last person, because the last person who briefed him tended to be the person that influenced his decision making at the close.
This is the sign of a simple mind. Does Donald Trump believe whoever he's been talking to last?
I've spent the last 100 days trying to go easy on Donald Trump because he's my commander in chief and he's somebody who I want to succeed. and I still want him to succeed. But I think 100 days is more than enough time for the President of the United States to, figure out who he is and what he stands for, especially a president that's previously served 4 years in the White House. And so I think it's time now for the gloves to come off. Donald Trump is a simple mind. I mean, we've always known this. He's not a complicated thinker, especially when it comes to foreign policy. He knows nothing about foreign policy. And he's a man who literally repeats the last thing he was told. Look at the nonsense he did with the MS-13 photograph. He was told by somebody that there was MS-13 on the he was shown an image, and that went into his simple mind. He's not capable of complex reasoning. He's not a knowledgeable man about the issues at hand. So yes, this simple-minded man does in fact listen to the last thing he is told by the people surrounding him.
You ticked off the names of the people around him, and we could go deeper into Sebastian Gorka and that crowd. And I agree with you. Some of them are hardcore neocons like Rubio. Some of them are definitely not neocons like Gabbard and Vance. But the one thing they all have in common, Zionists. Am I right?
You are right, but as I've said on your show before, Judge, I think that Donald Trump is more complex on Zionism than I don't think he's a Zionist at heart. I think that he is a political machine who understands that in order to become elected president, you have to surround yourself, cloak yourself, coach yourself with Zionists, and he has done that. But I do believe that he understands that if you're going to be America first, you must be America first. And what we're seeing is, having brought so many Zionists in around him, that's the old Godfather saying, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. And Zionism is the enemy of America, and we're starting to see some pushback on this, where Donald Trump is especially lashing out against Benjamin Netanyahu, who he apparently has caught red-handed, conspiring with his inner circle, Mr. Waltz, name one, to undermine Trump's own policies.
All right, I agree with everything you've just said. Do you believe the news reports from your own observations or your own sources that Trump is sick and tired of Netanyahu and believes that Netanyahu has been manipulating him, whether it's the Waltz incident or other things?
100%. We know that he was sick and tired of Benjamin Netanyahu before he was sworn in as president. Why else would he play a couple of Jeffrey Sachs clips that condemned Benjamin Netanyahu and pointed out that Netanyahu is responsible for getting America involved in the very Middle East conflicts that Donald Trump has so rightfully criticized. And Netanyahu's trying to get us knee deep in another Middle East war with Iran, something Donald Trump does not want to do. And so I think it's clear that Donald Trump has made a decision that Netanyahu's bad for America, and we're seeing a divorce take place live before us. It's an ugly divorce, but there's a divorce happening right now.
So the U.S. negotiates directly with Hamas, no Israeli involvement whatsoever, for the release of an American Israeli joint citizenship, born in New Jersey, 18 years in New Jersey, went to Israel, fought for the IDF. He was released today. The U.S. instigates humanitarian relief in Gaza without the knowledge or consent of Netanyahu. The U.S. stops killing the Houthis without the knowledge or consent of Netanyahu. The U.S. sends B-52 bombers home to the United States without the knowledge or consent of Netanyahu. I guess he's trying to send Netanyahu some kind of a concrete message.
Well, there's another one. Steve Witkoff is, as we speak, negotiating with the Iranians in a deal that will allow Iran to retain its nuclear enrichment capability.
Yeah, I keep hearing the opposite. Alistair says, and he agrees with you, that Iranians will never agree with this, that Witkoff has now changed and wants no enrichment. So let me just back up. You're the expert on nuclear, all things nuclear. Educate us a little bit. If you want to use nuclear sources, For hospital purposes, do you need enrichment?
If you have, for instance, Iran has the Tehran research reactor is used to create medical isotopes. And it uses,
that's what I'm talking about.
It uses 20% enriched fuel. It had previously, received its fuel from overseas sources. It ran out of fuel. Nobody would supply them with fuel. So Iran had no choice but to make its own fuel, which it has done. Iran also has a nuclear power reactor, several of them, at the Bushehr facility. Again, it requires 3.7% enriched uranium. The United States led the global boycott to prevent Iran from acquiring this fuel from abroad. So Iran developed its own enrichment capability. Today, people are talking about, they guarantee Iran's continued access to fuel from abroad. But Iran says, "Fool me once, blame it. Shame on me."
Okay, so where is Witkoff on this now? Is he negotiating for them to keep a certain amount of enrichment? They have superb hospitals. You can't run a hospital today without certain nuclear isotopes.
My understanding is that there were 3 rounds of negotiations, and at the end of the 3rd round, they had moved into the technical phase. And I'm just telling you right now, the technical phase is how do you monitor Iran's enrichment program? That's the discussion they were having when the Israelis said 000. And Witkoff came out and made a statement to that regard. There's a 4th round taking place right now that are getting ready to take place where the Iranians are saying, we are very pleased with what's happening. The United States is taking a realistic posture. This means that the Israelis lost, that the United States is talking about a deal, because there will be no deal. They're talking about a deal that has Iran retaining aspects of its enrichment program.
All right. So here is what I think is nonsensical, but you know this better than I. And it's not because I used to work there and I don't anymore, but it's Fox News claiming they found a nuclear reactor in Iran. Chris?
Fox News exclusive satellite images revealing the location of a previously unknown Iranian nuclear site. Now, the facility spans nearly 2,500 acres, and this is a big discovery. Jillian Turner has more from the State Department. Good morning, Jillian.
Pretty explosive, Dana. These satellite images that we have obtained exclusively show the alleged site location and even the layout of the secret, previously unknown nuclear weapons facilities inside Iran. This, of course, raises fresh concerns about the regime's role in these ongoing nuclear talks with the Trump administration. The National Council of Resistance of Iran has collected intelligence from sources on the ground inside Iran that locate this nuclear weapons facility in what is called Semnan province, far from the regime's already known nuclear sites. It's codenamed the Rainbow Site by Iran's officials, and it spans nearly 2,500 acres. It's been operating, as far as we can discern, for over a decade under the cover of a chemical production company that's called Diba Energy Siba. The so-called.
This was late last week. I haven't heard it anywhere since then. Is this credible?
No, not at all. Look, the NCRI, the National Council of Resistance in Iran, they're also known as the Mujahideen al-Khalq. These are Marxists. They've been against the Iranian regime since 1979. We conspired with them to orchestrate. The CIA works with them to orchestrate assassinations. The Israelis use them for assassinations. And these are people who have in the past given briefings written by the Israelis. This briefing is written by the Israelis. Now, it's delivered here in the United States. And this is where I don't understand why Tulsi Gabbard doesn't shut them down, because this is done by this is the Israelis seeking to throw a wrench into the negotiations. Look at the timing of it. This is a garbage report. First of all, that when they called it a nuclear weapons facility, what they're talking about is they say that the Iranians could be producing tritium. I may be pronouncing that wrong because I am not a nuclear scientist, but tritium is used in a boosted nuclear weapon. So if you have a standard fission weapon, if you have tritium in place, you can boost it. It shoots in, these neutrons, gets hyperactive, then you turn it into a fusion weapon, a hydrogen bomb. And that's what they're talking about. This is absurd in the extreme. Again, The International Atomic Energy Agency has had Iran under very stringent inspections. They look for these sort of things. This is simply an effort. What the NCRI and Israel's trying to do is open up this gigantic, very sensitive military industrial facility. Parchin is where they make their ballistic missiles. They have the chemical facilities that produce the precursor elements for the solid rocket fuel that are produced there. They want to create a condition where inspectors now will demand access to these facilities at the very moment when Trump's negotiator is talking with the Iranians about inspections. So no, there's nothing to the story whatsoever. This is as garbage get, and shame on Fox News for running with this story. Literally, why don't you have me on, Fox, at least to counterbalance it so I can show you kind of idiots you are. This is stupidity in the extreme.
Let's go back to Trump and the neocons. And I appreciate the analysis you just gave. I didn't know we were going to go there, but our conversation took us there. During his first term in office, didn't Trump effectively grow by trebling the Ukraine military? Didn't all that happen under him?
More than that, Judge. This is Donald Trump's war. He's trying to call it Joe Biden's war. He says this is Joe Biden's war. This war never would have happened had I been president. That's a lie, a straight up lie, because when he was president, the policies he eventually signed off on were supportive of the very policies that Joe Biden inherited from him and then expanded upon. Joe Biden did not invent the policies that led us to the conflict with Russia and Ukraine. Donald Trump is the one that took Barack Obama's policies, which were defensive only, and Donald Trump turned them into offensive training, offensive weaponry, because the Ukrainians said, we want to invade the Donbass. In the United States, under Donald Trump, went, we'll get you ready to invade the Donbass. Donald Trump is the man who created the concept of strategic defeat of Russia. He's the man who underwrote 20 CIA bases operating on Ukrainian soil. 20 CIA bases. Talk to Larry Johnson what a CIA base is and what they do. Talk to Alistair Crook what that means in terms of it. This isn't about analysts like me sitting back there reading things. No, this is about operators, paramilitary guys, training people to go into Russia, to spy, to carry an unconventional warfare, to target assassination, all the things necessary to bring down a government. That's what Donald Trump's policies were. And then he lost the presidency. Joe Biden picked it up and Joe Biden ran with it. Joe Biden actually had to tune down some of the things Trump was trying to do with the paramilitary guys. All this paramilitary unconventional warfare stuff began with Donald Trump. And it was the Biden administration that went, well, that's an act of war. We may want to tone that down. So Trump is responsible 100% for this mess. And
Trump is now boasting about sending or authorizing ATACMS, Taurus, and Javelins to Ukraine. Isn't he making, aren't we a co-belligerent fighting Russia? And how can the Kremlin take us seriously as mediators?
Look, the Kremlin right now, again, I don't speak for them, but I have spoken with people. I just enjoyed the Victory Day celebration at the Russian embassy. The Russians, they're realistic, they're pragmatic. They are thrilled to death that they're talking to the United States, because that wasn't happening under Joe Biden.
Okay.
And so as long as they're talking, that creates the possibility of something happening. But they also look at the inherent contradictions. They have no false expectations from, the Trump administration. This is confusing. I spoke to a friend who I speak to often about the situation in Ukraine, and this person is confused. Everybody's confused. People I speak to in Moscow are confused. People I speak here, everybody's confused about what Donald Trump wants. On the one hand, he speaks of peace. He speaks of, understanding the Russian perspective. On the other hand, he does this. He sends weapons, the stupidity of it. Now he's on an airplane where he may go to Istanbul. If the Zelensky in Istanbul, Putin might be flying to Tehran with a quick trip. What do they do if they meet? Will Trump tell Zelensky, you have to back down, accept the Russian terms, or will he try to strong arm Putin, which you don't do? And I don't think Putin would show up in Istanbul if he thought Trump was going to try and strong arm him. Donald Trump is remember what we said at the beginning, Judge? He's a simple man, a simple-minded man.
Right.
I hope he has somebody sitting next to him who's giving him good advice. I hope.
Oh God, who's going to be sitting next to him but the super neocon Marco Rubio?
Well, Rubio is going to Istanbul to do they call it a NATO mini ministerial that was sort of invented to interfere with Vladimir Putin's initiative. The Russians said, "Hey, we're going to send Yuri Ushakov to Istanbul to meet with a Ukrainian delegation." Ukraine has said, "Well, Zelensky said I'm going to be there. I want to meet with Putin," and the Russians are like, "Well, it's Ushakov." Now Rubio's coming in on the spur of the moment to do this 14 to 16 May ministerial. But it's there simply to interfere. And now we have Donald Trump apparently showing up, which once again shows the struggle, because I believe that Trump doesn't trust Rubio when it comes to Russia. I think he understands that Rubio is the man giving him the advice that is going to lead to enhanced conflict. He wants to trust Witkoff, but he's a weak man. He's a simple-minded man. And the person sitting right next to him before he opens his mouth or starts putting stuff out on social media is the person that influences what he says and what he does. Tulsi Gabbard's got to be going crazy because that's supposed to be her job. But the problem is she briefs him in the morning. So she comes in, briefs him in the morning, and he's probably all gung-ho to be realistic. And then as the day goes on, people come in and he gets
Sebastian Gorka and that crowd get to him. We have a new cut from Trump on the upcoming talks in Turkey about possibly, ready for this, lifting sanctions on Syria. Watch this.
Don't underestimate Thursday in Turkey. President Erdogan is going to be a great host, and we are doing some work with him having to do with Syria, too, by the way. We're going to have to make a decision on the sanctions, which we may very well relieve. We may take them off of Syria because we want to give them a fresh start.
Look, Syria is governed by Al-Qaeda right now. This shows you how simplistically stupid Donald Trump is. If you want to make that step, I know what he's doing, because what wasn't said there is that the deal is that Saudi Arabia will recognize Israel in exchange for Trump. I think that's with Hamas. Trump is going to recognize Palestine. Saudi Arabia is going to recognize Israel. Trump's going to lift sanctions on Jolani in Syria, and that's going to create opportunity.
Trump's going to recognize Palestine. Netanyahu will have a heart attack.
Well, I think that's what he wants. At this point, if Netanyahu killed over dead, Donald Trump would hold a party. He doesn't like Netanyahu. He never has liked Netanyahu. And this is Netanyahu's fault. Netanyahu's the man who lies straight to the president's face and then conspires behind the president. Donald Trump is a narcissist, a supreme narcissist. And the way you deal with narcissists is to stroke their egos. And you don't get caught speaking ill of them behind their back. You want to know why Steve Witkoff is so popular? Because he's never said a bad thing about Donald Trump. And when the time came, and this is before Trump was president, Witkoff stood up for Donald Trump, defended Donald Trump, went to bat for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump recognizes that kind of loyalty. Netanyahu is not a loyal man. And Donald Trump saying, we give you everything. We give you the bombs. We give you everything you need, everything you want, and you betray me. You stab me in the back. I mean, this is literally Michael Corleone basically taking Fredo out in the boat and popping it around.
Does the neocon mentality still hate all things Russian?
Yes, they don't. First of all, hate's a very strong word.
Okay.
Because to hate, you have to actually understand something. You have to know something about it. To hate means you have a deep insight into something, and it's so viscerally against everything you stand for, you hate it. Neocons don't hate Russia because they don't know anything about Russia. Literally, I could take all the neocons today, put the totality of the knowledge they have about Russia, and it would fit into the head of this pin. They are that stupid and that ignorant.
Well, what's the word to describe their feeling about Russia? Fear?
No, they don't fear Russia. They want you to fear Russia. See, they use Russia as a tool to manipulate the public. This is what Russophobia is all about. Their job is to spew lies about Russia, to tell mistruths about Russia, to make the public afraid of Russia so that the public will then nod their head stupidly when they put forward idiotic policy about Russia. That's what the neocons are about. They don't fear Russia. I mean, because they know Russia's not a threat. You don't need to lie. You don't need to manipulate if there's a true threat out there. If Russia was a genuine threat to the United States, it would be the easiest thing in the world to sell. But why do the neocons wrap themselves in lies? Because the truth about Russia is the exact opposite. They are not our enemies. They are our friends. Victory J just proved it. The 80th anniversary of when Americans and Russians stood side by side and defeated the worst threat the world has ever seen in the past couple centuries, Nazi Germany. And yet the neocons now have Donald Trump saying stupid things like, yeah, the Russians did a little bit, they lost a lot of guys, but they couldn't have won that war, not even close, without us and the great contribution which we made. We made great contributions. I will never denigrate the sacrifice made by any American in that conflict. We did great things. We fought on two fronts against two massive enemies, and we contributed to the victories. But to pretend that our going across on D-Day on June 1944 somehow turned the tide after the Russians stood strong at Stalingrad, crushed the Sixth Army, stood at Kursk, carried out operations in the Carpathian region that drew 7 divisions away from the Normandy front in May before we went across. If those 7 divisions were there, we would have lost. Eisenhower would have had to read that note that he had in his pocket. Yeah, that's the truth about World War II. We did a lot. We sacrificed a lot, but we could not have beaten Nazi Germany without the Soviet Army, the Red Army, that destroyed 76 to 80% of the best German units were destroyed by the Red Army on the Eastern Front, not on the Western Front.
And you know who agreed with you was Winston Churchill, who said the Red Army, quote, tore the guts out of the Wehrmacht. That's what he was talking about, what you just described.
Yeah, 100%. And remember, and Churchill was no friend of the Soviet. He's the man who came up with the plan right after World War II to assassinate Stalin and bring down the Soviet Union. So It's not as though Winston Churchill was a dyed-in-the-wool commie who was saying that. He just said the reality of it.
Wow. Trump has now said that he may very well fly to Turkey to try and initiate talks between Putin and Zelensky. Putin's not going to be in Turkey, is he?
No, but this is where it gets really interesting, Judge. Putin's flying to Tehran. And, Trump is, this is where his real estate mind comes into play, where there's so many factors going in on the deal. Russia is the secret sauce, the secret ingredient to our negotiations with Iran. Russia is behind the scenes doing things, helping us make sense to the Iran, getting the Iranians to the table. Russia's there to backstop us. And Putin's going to Iran right now, and he's going to be having conversation with the supreme leader and the Iranian president. But that also positions him, to do a couple things where Trump's going to owe him, because he's going to say, look, I'm helping you win this Iran thing. Now I'm in Tehran. If you can get Zelensky to cave on, Russian territorial demands, and you get Zelensky there ready to sign a document, and you're there, Mr. President, and you're going to be there as the guarantor of this, maybe Putin will come in. I would not want to be a Russian diplomat or an American diplomat right now, because they are going absolutely bananas trying to backstop this stuff, because you don't bring your principles together unless you have everything in order. And so they are working overtime right now to try and get all of this done, because I think Trump has said, I want something to happen in Istanbul, and Putin wouldn't be going to Tehran unless he was like, I'm willing to let something happen in Istanbul, but you have to meet our concerns. And Steve Witkoff knows every single one of those concerns inside and out. And Marco Rubio is going to try and sabotage every single one of those concerns. And Steve Kellogg should be sent as far away from this discussion as possible. And J.D. Vance should be hanging around, whispering sweet nothings in the president's ear to keep him on focus.
Here's what Trump just said about Turkey.
I think you may have a good result out of the Thursday meeting in Turkey between Russia and Ukraine. And I believe the two leaders were going to be there. I was thinking about flying over. I don't know where I'm going to be on Thursday. I've got so many meetings. But I was thinking about actually flying over there. There's a possibility of it, I guess, if I think things can happen.
Wow. Again, Netanyahu's going to have a heart attack. if Trump cuts a deal with Putin and with the president of Iran.
Yeah, no, this is a divorce from Netanyahu. And it's interesting because Netanyahu then has spoken about detoxing Israel from American security systems. What the hell? Of course, now they're meeting with the Germans. You might see the Germans say, well, we will back you up. We will give you the weaponry and all that stuff. Great. So Germany is once again on the side of genocide. That's nice. But I think this is Israel floundering right now. This is, again, the success of Hamas. For all the people that didn't, when I said, look, Hamas beat the Israelis for 15 months. In the end, they had to take a compromise, bring in this deal. But Hamas has a lot to play. There's a lot of Hamas left. And for Trump, who said Hamas is, a terrorist organization, will never deal with them, will never function with them, now directly negotiate with them to get an American hostage released, and talking about recognizing a Palestine with what? The very Hamas people that he talked to. He's meeting with Jolani, an al-Qaeda terrorist who just a few months ago had a $10 million ward on his head. So please, people, let's just keep the right people whispering in Donald Trump's ear.
A $10 million reward on his head posted by his own State Department.
Yeah.
Can't make this up. Scotty, thank you very much.
Don't forget about this, Judge. There's a reason why there's 10 million. He killed Americans. This is a man.
Jolani killed Americans?
Jolani killed Americans. Jolani was AQI before he became ISIS, before he became al-Nusra. This is a man who in Iraq was responsible for the deaths of Americans. And now we're going to have the President of the United States meet this guy. I'm not saying that, there's under no circumstance should this ever happen, but let's understand what's happening here. This isn't just a casual meeting. This is the President of the United States meeting with an al-Qaeda terrorist leader who killed Americans and has a $10 million bounty on his head, and we're going to normalize relations with this guy. Hey, why couldn't we just normalize relations with Bashar al-Assad? It would have been a hell of a lot easier, and we wouldn't have to put up with any of this nonsense.
Thank you, my dear friend. Well, we covered a vast array of issues, and I deeply appreciate your analysis, Scotty. All the best to you. We'll see you again next week.
Thank you.
Of course. Coming up on all of this at 4:30 this afternoon, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.
Putin said that will be available on Thursday, but also we're going to keep fighting. They've never said anything different. Their ambassador, their deputy UN ambassador on our show emphasized we want negotiations, but we're not going to stop fighting. And we'll either get what we believe is our security requirements on our western border, either the military way or the diplomatic way. But one way or the other, they're going to get it. And so they have never said anything besides we're going to keep fighting. And Zelensky continues to throw this up and said, oh, well, we'll see who really wants peace, because if they don't agree to our terms, then that means they're the impediment. And it's getting picked up all over the West. I've seen heads of state use that. I've seen it in talking heads on different media shows. So again, he's succeeding in the media. He's getting the headlines that he's looking for. But these people who are promoting this are, for various reasons, either self-blind or just blind, and they don't even know what they're doing. They're not looking at the balance of power. They're not looking at the continuing movement west of the line of contact. They're not looking at the continuing skyrocketing of the casualty numbers on the Ukraine side, and they don't realize that you can grab the headlines, but that's not stopping the Russian army on the ground. And that's where we are. So the question is, Zelensky has already bypassed diplomatic off-ramps in Minsk. 2019, going back to 2019, that's when he sat there with Putin, on the platform with Putin. Let's see, I think it was Hollande and Merkel, then the Chancellor of Germany. Kind of a famous picture you may have seen. He had a chance to accomplish the Minsk agreements that he was elected to. Zelensky was in 2019. And for a number of reasons I don't want to go into, bottom line is he didn't matter what they were. So he got rid of that one. Then the December 2021, he had another chance to, not as good as the Minsk agreements, but still would eventually have resulted in the Russian troops withdrawing. Then Istanbul, 2022. Then after the disastrous failed offensives in 2023, when it was very clear that there would never be a path to unseat and push Russia out, the only rational course of action that would save your country and preserve freedom and independence for what's remained would have been to have a negotiated settlement. Then he bypassed that one as well. Then, of course, the summer, June 2024, Putin's one of his last offers, the most recent one prior to this one, he bypassed that one. And now here we are again. And I keep saying that this season right here, in my view, is most likely the last diplomatic opportunity they're going to get. If they don't accept this one, I think that there will come a point to where the Russian side does what they did in 1945, toward the end of the Second World War, where they said there's no more to go. Actually, it was after the Kursk offensive. It was even before that, when the last big offensive by the Germans in Kursk, and I want to say it was 1943, it was an utter failure. The Soviets just decimated the German side, and from that point forward, the Soviets were not interested in talking anymore. They said, nope, we'll see you in Berlin. And then they said even though it took another, I guess, about year and a half before that finally happened, but it was inexorable at that point, and the Russians said, we'll pay whatever price it takes. This is where we're going. I think that we're getting close to them making that point here. This is probably the last chance, and I think Putin still is genuinely willing to have a negotiated settlement on these ugly terms I keep mentioning, or they're going to say, fellas, we'll just meet you at the gates in Kiev for the instruments of surrender. I think that's where we're at right now. Zelensky has passed every opportunity to get this off. The West has enabled it. The West is absolutely enabling it right now. And those gentlemen, Tusk of Poland, Merz of Germany, Macron of France, and Starmer of UK, history will condemn them for what they're doing. When all the emotion is gone and they no longer have the reins of power, historians will look back and say, what in the world were these guys thinking? I mean, how cruel to continue to encourage this guy to keep going and to enable him and to equip him. It's similar to saying, here's this drugged out junkie on the side of the road, and instead of giving him shock therapy and trying to help him overcome his addiction, you give him more drugs, and you say, yeah, here's some more stuff to shoot up into your veins or something. That's the equivalent. That's the most cruel thing you could do. And that's what they're doing right now. And I think that it's going to have that kind of reaction here. There's always the possibility that some unexpected thing comes out of somewhere, but I sure don't see it on the horizon anywhere, folks. The only thing that we can see, the only trends that matter here, where there is capacity and resources and political will for it, is on the Russian side. They've got everything they need to make that same decision that they did in the Second World War, to where they just said, no more diplomacy. We'll just meet you in Kiev. We'll see if there's going to be that moment come pretty soon. But this is going to be a busy week, I think, because number one, the European Union is saying if Putin doesn't agree to this ceasefire that they demanded by midnight tonight, as of just before we came on the air, they're saying all these new sanctions are going to go into effect. I'm sure Russia doesn't want them, but they're like, we've played this before. It's never worked, and it won't work now either. We'll find ways to bypass this and mitigate the issues, and we'll move on. And none of those things will have any impact on the war on the ground. We've already seen them play out. And then, of course, we'll see what happens by Thursday. If anybody from Ukraine doesn't go to Istanbul, if the Russians do, Erdogan says he's happy to do it. You see Trump says, yeah, I think y'all should take advantage of this. Will Trump eventually walk away? If that doesn't happen by Thursday, will he just, I don't know, go back and switch back again over to the European side? I don't know. We can't tell because he kind of goes back and forth depending on what day it is. So it's unclear. And I don't see any evidence that anybody in the West, any of those four leaders especially, is going to wake up and say, well, we recognize the error of our ways. I think that they'll just keep going to the absolute bitter end. And look, you got to say it. It ain't their troops that are dying. It's not their countrymen that are paying the blood price. So they don't really have any reason to stop doing what they've been doing for, now well into the fourth year of this war. So I imagine they'll keep going. And I think the Russians will keep going. And the predictable end that more Ukrainians will die for no reason, more territory will be lost, more cities will be destroyed until at some point either the army breaks or Russians, even if it took another year plus of war, get all the way up to the gates of Kiev and up to the Dnieper River. That's where I think we're heading here. We'll wait and see what's going to happen here. Now, as I mentioned a minute ago, we're going to have Doug McGregor on here in about a half an hour. And he's going to give his view on what is the play here. What are these people actually trying to do? Whether it's good or bad, we're going to try to shine a little light here to try to at least understand what the intent is and what the expectations of all these are. Don't want to miss that. Doug's always got a great viewpoints on this. We'll see you in about 30 minutes on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.
We see our customers as people, neighbors, friends. Flow customers, get your $20,000 supermarket.
Would be leaving as part of discussions to close a deal. To close a deal, not to just talk about it. An American source at CNN that after the release of Aidan Alexander, discussions on a comprehensive agreement would begin. Now, Trump had hoped that this deal would be agreed upon his arrival to the region, but that didn't happen. It didn't happen because Benjamin Netanyahu was insisting that there won't be a deal, and he wants to continue this war. He clearly did not want to adhere to all of the demands of the Palestinian resistance, and he was unhappy with all of the situation. However, now Israel is forced to send this delegation to Doha and to Cairo after pressure from the United States. And this means that Benjamin Netanyahu is slowly getting the message that I need to have some action done so that we can calm the situation down, reduce the tensions between us and the administration. He sent Ron Dermer. It didn't work with Ron Dermer. Ron Dermer came back with many statements that, well, Netanyahu is actually frustrated, annoyed, and surprised. Why is he annoyed, frustrated, and surprised? Because the United States is talking with Hamas directly, because they're reaching this deal without consulting us, and because they're going to a deal with Iran that will not necessarily stop Iran from enriching uranium. And there were also reports and quotes about Benjamin Netanyahu saying that any country that has any sort of deals behind Israel or without any sort of coordination with Israel actually harms Israel. That's something very problematic. Clearly, Netanyahu, he had a speech, he had a statement today, very short video, in which he said, I had a conversation with Donald Trump. Both of us agree that we need to release all of the prisoners of war and we need to also achieve victory. However, that can't hide all of the problems that are happening. And as a matter of fact, some people in Israel are actually celebrating this. They are celebrating this because they're saying at least one of them was released. Benjamin Netanyahu clearly failed, but we have one of the prisoners of war back now. At least it's better than nothing. So there was one report in the Israeli website Ynet saying that the deal over Netanyahu's head may turn out to be a blessing. Now, in this report, they're saying that the release of Aidan Alexander is an independent American move. It's an insult to the state of Israel, but it also holds a benefit. And that benefit, according to the report, is that it can push for a broader deal with the efforts of Steve Witkoff, even with the talk about all of the solutions in the day after. But one thing that they mentioned that is a key problem for Benjamin Netanyahu is the fact that this deal could also end in Hamas surviving in the Gaza Strip with American support. That means Israel is preparing for a scenario inside of the Gaza Strip where Hamas and the United States would have some sort of an understanding. There would be an administration that is not technically Hamas, but agreed upon by Hamas with the Hamas blessings. The armed wing of Hamas and the other Palestinian resistance movements, it will not be touched. They will not be touched because they're non-negotiable. And they're tied with the Israeli occupation. So deal with the occupation, then try and talk about the resistance, occupation, oppression, right of return, all of that. But in Israel, they're trying to prepare the public opinion for the fact that, look, we're going to have Hamas here. Now, that's not something new. Everyone knows that. In Israel, everyone knows that they can't defeat Hamas. And many people know, if not the majority, that Benjamin Netanyahu is saying that he wants to defeat Hamas just as an impossible excuse to continue the war. Israel said it wants to eliminate Hamas multiple times previously. It failed miserably. And Benjamin Netanyahu was the man who was coordinating with Hamas for all of his terms. Hundreds of millions were going into the Gaza Strip, billions even. Everything was going fine. But he thought that Hamas would be bribed by getting the money and basically making it hush money, and that's it, we'll control Gaza and no problem. Become like another puppet regime who gets money and goes quiet. But the Hamas and other Palestinian movements, by the way, it's not their nature. They're liberation movements looking for the overall liberation of the Palestinian people and the historical rights of the Palestinian people. And now this report, alongside other reports in Israel, are coming to give the Israelis a reality check. Wake up, you fools. You have a prime minister who is fooling you, deceiving you, and you're going to have to reach a deal, and Hamas will have to remain there, whether we like it or not. And guess what? The United States will be coordinating with them. Why? Because they're coordinating with them now. The United States is having talks with Hamas directly. They've clearly been having talks for a very long time, and they're continuing to have talks. They're having deals. Again, despite what you may think about this gesture coming from Hamas, without guaranteed returns, or at least undeclared. Do you know what I mean? Because something can be undeclared, and we've decided to keep it right between, behind curtains for the meantime. Although it's coming simultaneously with all of this talk about a bigger deal, Israel confirming that there's a lot of pressure against it. Now, the talks are happening. The delegation is in Doha and in Qatar. And the interesting thing about this delegation is the fact that these delegations went to close a deal. The delegations went to close a deal and not to just go and negotiate. Because previously Benjamin Netanyahu was sending certain delegations to the Doha and Egypt and Cairo, but not with the intention of closing, because he did not give them a mandate. He did not give them the power to close the deal. But now in Israel, they're saying that he's sending them to close a deal. And if a deal gets closed, that means Netanyahu would submit to the pressure of Donald Trump. But if not, that means the problems will continue. Now, Hamas, they had a statement. Hamas made a statement in relation to this release, and they also said that there are advanced talks with the United States. So these advanced talks are coming simultaneously with the release of Aidan Alexander, and they're continuing after. So this was one of the reports that was published here in one of the Palestinian websites, advanced negotiations with the United States regarding a ceasefire in Gaza. According to this report, Hamas leader told Al Jazeera that direct negotiations with the United States administration have entered an advanced stage aimed at achieving an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. It's been going on for days now, and they're discussing the mechanisms of the entry of humanitarian aid and a complete cessation of the military operations. So the priority is to, of course, lift the siege, give the relief for the people. But they're also talking about ending the war completely. And in relation to the mechanisms, by the way, there have been plenty of talks about aid going into the Gaza Strip and the United States having certain private companies dealing with the aid that's going into the Gaza Strip. The initial points, they will have points to provide relief for the 2.5 million inside of the Gaza Strip. Initially, it will provide immediate relief for 300,000, and then it will expand to all of the other people inside of the Gaza Strip. And that's according to the Witkoff document. Now, the Witkoff document, if you're not familiar with it, it was released in a couple of locations. One of them was Yediot Ahronot and other Palestinian networks too. He was talking about the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, saying that this mechanism, this relief, this initial relief for the Gaza Strip, it will include the establishment of 4 distribution centers throughout the Gaza Strip, each of which will serve up to 300,000 people in the first phase, with plans to expand later to serve up to 2 million people. I was about to read that as starve for some reason, because that's what we're used to, people starving Gaza. But finally, there's more talk from the United States about actually serving the people of Gaza rather than starving them. The document stated that the distribution would take place through secure channels without any Israeli military presence, and under the direct supervision of independent security and safety teams. The materials, food parcels, hygiene supplies, medicine, and water would be distributed solely according to the need and without any discrimination. Plans are underway to provide boxes to Palestinian families at a cost of $65 per box, 50 complete family meals. Each person will receive a meal containing 1,750 calories for $1.31. I have a couple of problems with this. My biggest problem with that is that people on this planet, they have the power to dictate how many calories enter a person's body. People have the power to starve children and other people to death. Israel has been starving people to death, using starvation as a tool of war. And guess what? No coverage on earth would be enough to cover the horrors that they've conducted in Gaza. That's apart from the genocide and infanticide and every other side you can think of that they've conducted in Gaza. Every abhorrent act of savagery and barbarism, supported by even bigger barbaric maniacs supporting them. But there's a very big problem in a world that has people who can dictate how many calories each individual eats, and that's when they decide to give them food. That shouldn't be the case. That's not normal. No one should have the right to dictate who eats and who doesn't eat. What kind of world do we live in? Now, going back to the statement of Witkoff. Witkoff said without Israeli presence and independent security and safety teams. That's the thing that's Israel going to try and work around. Why? Because from an Israeli perspective, they don't want aid to go into Hamas, right? Everything goes to Hamas eventually. And, they steal aid and they hide it in the tunnels and Dude, when aid goes in, we see the people eating. When aid goes into the Gaza Strip, we see people actually eating, getting the boxes, and guess what? Some of them actually have videos and they put it on YouTube and online and whatever. It isn't going in the tunnels. And guess what Israel does? It goes and bombs warehouses and places where there's food storage, restaurants. Flour massacres to levels where we have the flour massacre, many of them, right? Now, this document coming from Witkoff is evidence that, and the talks and confirmations coming from Hamas, is evidence that they're now looking at the steps before the actual implementation. Netanyahu could be still delaying all of this so that he doesn't appear to be a person who submits to the will of the United States president. Israel first. We will do it on our own. He now takes pride by saying that, well, look, previously Biden told me don't go into Rafah, and then I went into Rafah. All of that talk, despite the fact that wherever he went into the Gaza Strip, his terrorist child killers were getting a beating. And their biggest ambushes are happening in the past week by the Palestinian resistance. Every few days, another ambush, similar to the previous one, by the way. So you're talking about amateur, stupid genocide soldiers going there, not knowing what to do, roaming around. Oh, excuse me, some of them were commanders. There was a battalion commander and a deputy commander of a division who were killed a few days ago in Shujaiya, or severely wounded, according to Israel. So not all of them are like amateurs. But you get the message. These people are going there for the sake of Benjamin Netanyahu when his son is bathing in Miami and in other parts of the world. And they're getting a beating. They're getting a beating from the Palestinian resistance. But Netanyahu, of course, wants to portray it to the Israeli cult that follows him, that no, I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to listen to Trump. And guess what? Even if Trump wants to dictate the time, I'm not really going to play ball with that, and he's going to try and stretch it up until the last second. Now, to be fair, to be totally fair with what I'm seeing, and that's my opinion here, nothing is clear. There is nothing that we can say is a very hopeful sign that something is going to work. The only points are, well, the Hamas decided to release a man based on certain developments. If this is just a gesture of goodwill without any sort of return, then that's going to be problematic. There are things that are talking about a mechanism and advanced stages. However, based on our previous experience and based on the moves that are coming from Benjamin Netanyahu, there needs to be something concrete to provide security, stability, relief, recovery, healing for the people of Gaza. And that requires a full commitment to end the genocide and follow up with the punishment of the war criminals led by Benjamin Netanyahu and everyone who supported them as well. Without that, there's going to continue to be a risk. Now, even if there is a ceasefire, and even if there is relief and Gaza gets rebuilt and all of that is done, there's still going to be an ongoing problem because there is no core solution. This core solution is something that has been mentioned multiple times in recent months. The fact that all the sides are looking to get an all-out solution. However, again, that all-out solution is not going to happen with Benjamin Netanyahu. It isn't going to happen with Benjamin Netanyahu and the most extreme of the extremes of a government in a country that was established on extremism and supremacy and mass terror and killing. Is Trump going to find the formula? Is he going to make certain moves that will indeed force Netanyahu? That's it? Perhaps. Listen, today, global newspapers, New York Times, some European media too, were talking in a more kind of sympathetic way about Gaza. New York Times, I believe that report was, the Israeli government is no longer an ally. The Israeli government, not Israel. In what appears to be something coordinated. Is this temporary? Is this part of a bigger move? We don't know. But what we do know is that, Netanyahu and Israel as a state, they've been shooting themselves in the foot, in the knee, in the elbow, in the lung, and maybe soon in the heart too. But there is prospect. There is prospect. Let's see what happens in the next coming days. Maybe some good news will come, at least finally, to the people of Gaza, which is something that everyone has been waiting for. But in the meantime, there's nothing solid to confirm that indeed a breakthrough is done and over, and that's it. We are about to end it. And of course, in the next few days, we'll be monitoring all of the situation, the statements that are coming from Trump when he visits, because he could have potentially planned for a certain declaration to happen upon his arrival to the region, maybe when he's in Qatar, Saudi, or the UAE. Now, despite the fact that Saudi Arabia told him, don't even talk to us about normalization with Israel, don't even mention the country, that was a prerequisite to his visit, there is still very high likelihood that he's going to mention something to do with Gaza in the region. That's why Witkoff is there, and they're actually sending or planning to send the American Israeli who was just released to Qatar, to Doha, immediately after his release. Why? Because Donald Trump wants to meet him directly, and he wants to show that this is my accomplishment. This is my accomplishment. So interesting things indeed. There are many indications that something might be happening in relation to a ceasefire or something bigger than a ceasefire. However, still no solid confirmation yet.
Let's go right from your analysis of what was happening in Yemen and the Yemeni armed forces' continued attacks on Israeli military sites to the political analysis of how both Israel and the Trump administration tried to spin the situation with the ceasefire between Yemen and the U.S. as some sort of capitulation to the U.S.'s demands. Can we?
Vegeta's own original version of a Super Saiyan Blue power-up known as Super Saiyan Blue Evolved debuted in the Tournament of Power, but just how strong can it be? Super Saiyan Blue Evolved is actually one of my favorite new forms in the Dragon Ball series. However, it's vastly different than Ultra Ego in its own unique ways. But does that make it viable today still? Vegeta first got this form during the Tournament of Power in the Dragon Ball Super anime, driven by his promise to revive Cabba in Universe 6 during the battle against Universe 11. In this state, referred to as a uniquely styled mastery of Super Saiyan Blue original to Vegeta, Vegeta just shattered through all of his previous limits in a pretty spectacular fashion. I remember when this form first debuted, people were calling it Royal Blue amongst other things, which is honestly a pretty cool name that I wish stuck. This form concentrates power far beyond regular Super Saiyan Blue, potentially 10-fold stronger than the previous form. Despite an increase in muscle mass, it enhances not only Vegeta's strength, but also his speed, agility, and stamina, showing just how much Goku and Vegeta value limiting the drawbacks in their recent forms. And within the Tournament of Power, he also showed the ability to harness that transformation at will after he first awakened it. Vegeta achieved this form in the manga through frustration at Goku surpassing him with Ultra Instinct, and Jiren recognized its effectiveness against formidable opponents. It's a lot easier to compare this form directly to the strength of Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken, especially with the assumed multiplier, even though it seems far less strenuous than Goku's form in the anime, so even with Ultra Ego, I hope Vegeta still somehow adapts this more in the future. Vegeta's own original version of a Super Saiyan Blue power-up known as Super Saiyan Blue Evolved debuted in the Tournament of Power, but just how strong can it be? Super Saiyan Blue Evolved is actually one of my favorite new forms in the Dragon Ball series. However, it's vastly different than Ultra Ego in its own unique ways. But does that make...
If this goes on, he won't make it. Not yet. Keep going. I can still stop him. Is that all you've got? Okay then, guess it's my turn. If this goes on, he won't make it.
Do this Tai Chi workout for 7 minutes.
So President Trump and several members of his cabinet, as well as Elon Musk, arrived in Riyadh today in Saudi Arabia to have discussions with the Saudis. The internet went into sort of a frenzy whenever they sat down and the Saudi family started serving their deeply rooted cultural Saudi coffee, also known as kawa, and it looked like President Trump wasn't going to drink any, although he later definitely took a sip because we saw video of that. And then the White House just posted this on the White House website saying that President Donald J. Trump secures historic $600 billion investment commitment in Saudi Arabia. Now, what I've read up on this, it says that the following represent just a few of the many transformative deals secured in Saudi Arabia. The Saudi Arabian Data Vault is going to be moving forward with plans to invest $20 billion in AI data centers and energy infrastructure in the United States. Google, Data Vault, Oracle, Salesforce, AMD, and Uber are committing to invest $80 billion in cutting-edge transformative technologies in both countries. And then Hill International, Jacobs, Parsons, and AECOM are building key infrastructure projects like King Salman International Airport, King Salman Park, the Vault, Qiddiya City, and a bunch more, totaling $2 billion in U.S. service exports. Additional major exports include GE Vernova's gas turbines and energy solutions, totaling $14.2 billion, Boeing 737-8 passenger aircraft for Avi lease, totaling $4.8 billion, and then in the healthcare sector, Shamek 4 Solutions LLC will be investing $5.8 billion, including a plant in Michigan, to launch a high-capacity IV fluid facility. Investment partnerships include several sector-specific funds with a strong emphasis on U.S. deployment, such as the $5 billion Energy Investment Fund, the $5 billion New Aerospace and Defense Technology Fund, and the $4 billion Enfield Sports Global Sports Fund, each channeling substantial capital into American industries, driving innovation and creating high-quality jobs across the United States. There's a whole lot more on the website for the White House that discusses more about this stuff, so if you want to check it out, go to the website and take a look. So President Trump and several members...
Streaming was the dumbest shit that we ever did in history. We finally started getting pennies, and then you're gonna let these motherfuckers give us fractions? The only reason why they didn't let it happen to movies is because they still making money off movies. Right. They hadn't sucked that totally dry yet. We had just found out how to create our first mom and pop stores, how to burn our own CDs, even though we was bootlegging. Bro, we gave it to tight motherfuckers who don't even care about music. When people from distribution companies call me and say, Banner, I need you to help me fight on this streaming shit, and then they got cut into the equation, and then they didn't call me no more. They cut the right artists in, and they sold y'all out. I told them that was the wrong thing to do. The God box failed because I wouldn't stream my fucking album. We gave fucking hip-hop away, so don't bitch about it. Now ain't no need for a union. Now we gave it away. Streaming was the dumbest shit that we ever did in history. We finally started getting pennies, and then you're gonna let these motherfuckers give us fractions? The only reason why they didn't let it happen to movies is because they still making money off movies. Right. They hadn't sucked that totally dry yet. We had just found out how to create our first mom and pop stores, how to burn our own CDs, even though we was bootlegging. Bro, we gave it to tight motherfuckers who don't even care about music. When people from distribution companies call me and say, Banner, I need you to help me fight on this streaming shit, and then they got cut into the equation, and then they didn't call me no more. They cut the right artists in, and they sold y'all out. I told them that was the wrong thing to do. The God box failed because I wouldn't stream my fucking album. We gave...
A gorilla could literally rip you in half, and that's not the craziest part.
6 times stronger than a human. Their arms can lift 1,800 pounds, like a fridge, with one hand. Bite force of 1,300 psi, stronger than a lion. But they're vegetarians, mostly. Punch force? Over 1,700 pounds. That's 10x a boxer's punch, but they rarely fight. Silverbacks can bench press 4,000 pounds. Their grip strength crushes coconuts. Be honest, could you survive? A gorilla could literally rip you in half, and that's not the craziest part. 6 times stronger than a human. Their arms can lift 1,800 pounds, like a fridge, with one hand. Bite force of 1,300 psi, stronger than a lion. But they're vegetarians, mostly. Punch force? Over 1,700 pounds. That's 10x a boxer's punch, but they rarely fight. Silverbacks can bench press 4,000 pounds. Their grip strength crushes coconuts. Be honest, could you survive? A gorilla could literally rip you in half. And
Jamaica, you don't want to miss this. Come link with at 7 Retirement Crescent, Kingston 5. When the price drop, move fast. From May 15 to 17, it's our warehouse sale. And everything, and I mean everything, is up to 80% off. Contractors, mechanics, small business owners, whether you need parts, power tools, or safety gear, DJ Hanna has a sale for you. DJ Hanna & Sons. Real deals, real tools, real fast. Jamaica, you don't want to miss this. Come link with at 7 Retirement Crescent, Kingston 5. When the price drop, move fast. From May 15 to 17.
Don't.
You know who threw that can?
What can?
You know who threw that can?
No, I didn't really see.
When you see this scene, you might think she's crazy, and that's when she's considered a public enemy by the entire town, with people everywhere trying to bully her. All because of these 3 billboards. 7 months ago, Mildred's daughter was raped, murdered, and burned in the town. And to this day, the culprits have still not been found, and she's upset with the police department's inaction, and rents 3 abandoned billboards along the highway, and writes her grievances against the police, raped while dying, and still no arrests. How come? Sheriff Willoughby? She also got the TV media to give an interview under the 3 billboards. She accused the police of not doing their best to solve the case, and the reason why Mildred did this was that she did not want the case to be forgotten. She just wanted the truth, and soon the incident was spread rapidly. In order to make Mildred remove the 3 billboards, the sheriff made his first visit to the door, patiently explaining the difficulties of the case, and to see that she would not relent, he asked her to plead for mercy.
I got cancer. I'm dying.
I know it. Well, they wouldn't be as effective after you croak, right?
The constable couldn't stand it and detained her friend and threatened her, but she wasn't afraid. She broke into the police station and cursed.
Hey, fuckhead!
The police aren't the only ones who want Mildred to take down the billboards. Everyone in the town knows that the sheriff is a good man. Everyone knows that he is terminally ill and will soon be dead. At one time, they sympathized with what happened to Mildred, but they disapprove when she does justice for her daughter in this way. The priest dissuades her, the dentist threatens her, and all the stops are fought back by her.
Don't.
You know who threw that can?
What can?
You know who threw that can?
No, I didn't really see.
When you see this scene, you might think she's crazy, and that's when she's considered a public enemy by the entire.
Dear children of God, the Lord says here that you had heeded my commandments. You have obeyed his words. So what is the reward, my dear child? The reward is that your peace would have been like a river, and your righteousness like the waves of the sea. Amen. Today, we can get everything because we buy through money. So whatever we want, when we have money, we buy it and we satisfy that need. But can you buy the peace? No, you cannot buy. It is a gift of God. Peace. Have everything in your life, but no peace. Have nothing in your life. No peace. What type of life you are living, my dear child? Still now you have been going through a lot of problems. Case problems, divorce problems, property problems, job problem, health problems, finance problems, homeless problems, so many problems, marriage problems, barren problems. So lot of things you are going through. So there may be some reasons behind it. That is the only reason is that your sin. your ancestors' sins, maybe. So, my dear child, first you ask for the forgiveness. But still, sometimes the God grants certain sorrow in your life because He just want to know that He's preparing a great thing in your life. So, during these periods, He watches you. He watches you every second, and you have followed His commandments. So He is very happy. The Lord is very happy. The Father is very happy. So the Father is saying to you today, my dear child, whatever cases you're facing now, whatever depression you're facing now, how many problems you are surrounded by you, and they are trying to crush you, my dear child, the Lord is saying that I will give you the peace like a river. Not a small peace, not just for a 2 days, 3 days, or 1 hour. It is a peace like a river. Forever He is giving, my dear child. It will be flowing. This is what we want. This is the greatest blessing, my dear child. Peaceful life is the greatest blessing. Whatever we have, we don't have, that is next thing. But peaceful life is important. So the Lord is saying to you that He's going to give a peace like a river, and your righteous like the waves of the sea, and our righteous like the waves of the sea. Amen. So His reward is great, man. Today, hold your hands to your heart, close to your heart, and say, Lord, please give me your peace. Please fill my house with your peace. Pray like that. Raise your hands wherever you are. Raise your hands and say, Lord, grant me this peace to me and my family. I want this. The Lord will send you, my dear children. He is giving you His peace to you, and you will be blessed in the name of Jesus. Dear children of God, the Lord says here that you...
Ashanti is the biggest fake out in R&B music history. Ashanti was a cheat code. That's all she was. And by the way, I'm not saying Ashanti is whack or anything. I'm just saying Irv cheated the game for her. Let me tell you what I mean. Look at everybody from that era. They could dance. They could sing their ass up. You could say, I don't like Beyonce's song, but you can't say when she gets on stage, she doesn't kill it. You could say, I don't like Chris Brown and Usher music, but they get on stage and kill it. Ashanti doesn't kill it on stage. She just sings. She's a pretty girl that sings great songs, but the songs are all remixed. Her first single is what? A Biggie remix. She comes with baby, baby, baby. And then guess what that was? That was Scarface. Mary, Mary. When she did the one on Rain on Me. That's the Jay-Z Can I Live beat. Can I Live? Ashanti first 5 or 6 singles was all remakes of Men records. Ashanti is the biggest fake out in R&B music history. Ashanti was a cheat code. That's all she was. And by the way, I'm not saying Ashanti is whack or anything. I'm just saying Irv cheated the game for her. Let me tell you what I mean. Look at everybody from that era. They could dance. They could sing their ass up. You could say, I don't like Beyonce's song, but you can't say when she gets on stage, she doesn't kill it. You could say, I don't like Chris Brown and Usher music, but they get on stage and kill it. Ashanti doesn't kill it on stage. She just sings. She's a pretty girl that sings.
What people need to understand about this is like, this is what's called a plant. Somebody who didn't put in the work, but the machine that they came in set up the work for her. She never struggled. She never hustled, worked a 9 to 5, borrowed a loan from a bank, refinance or whatever, her mortgage of her house, or used any of her own money to create her own foundation. Someone came in with the foundation, put it under her, and said, you don't have to do X, Y, and Z. You're pretty, you got a nice body, you got some vocals. We're gonna write the songs for you, set you up, hook you up with other artists that are already established. They're gonna co-sign you and block. Those are plans. That's how like how Sexy Red got in and whatever. That's how that works for like most industries. No matter what industry you are, especially in entertainment, somebody plants you in. The hardest thing to do is literally grow from your own scratch or from the community. Like how back in the days, the rappers, they had to hustle from the streets, sell CDs out of their cars. Today, it's like streaming from your own YouTube channel. That's hustling CDs out of your car and making the money that the community is giving you when they buy your CDs for like $5.99. That's like a donation for you streaming for $5 or whatever. And you save that money, you take that money and you reinvest it. And that's what you use to create your own foundation. very few people can start like that in this day and age, because the way the system is set, viewers, especially on streaming platforms, YouTube, Twitch, you name whatever, the person that has their own ability or whatever, they're, unless you sign under like the big platforms, if you don't sign with them, it's bury you in the sea of other great talents that nobody fishes for, because no one cares. They only, all they see is what's put on their home feed. That's it. That's pretty much it.
Great songs, but the songs are all remixed. Her first single is what? A biggie. Ashanti is the biggest fake out in R&B music history.
So the Chinese People's Liberation Army Air Force, or PLAF, conducted a very well-orchestrated air rehearsal for its Victory over Japan Day, which is also called VJ Day. They're going to have a military parade in September. I believe on September 3rd of 2025 is when it's actually scheduled. And in this display, they featured a bunch of different aerial formations, including J-20 stealth fighters, Z-20 helicopters, and multiple other aircraft over Beijing. And this is according to some of the state media over there in China. Now, I think it's pretty safe to assume that some of these formations and these displays can be used for boosting local morale and also as a show of force to anybody that they would consider adversarial. So the Chinese People's Liberation...
Are you going to be grabbing my ass like old Congressman Johnson?
Oh, no, I would never grab your ass.
Well, you said that awful fast. What's wrong with my ass?
Oh, there's nothing wrong with your ass. I'm just, you know, I'm the new congressman. I ain't be doing none of his old things he did. I ain't gonna grab nobody's old ass. I mean, I ain't gonna grab nobody's ass. You know, hey, I think we're on the 4th floor.
I'll grab it. Are you gonna be grabbing my ass like old Congressman Johnson?
Oh, no, I would never grab your ass.
Well, you said that awful fast. What's wrong with my ass?
Oh, there's nothing wrong with your ass. I'm just, you know, I'm the new congressman. I ain't be doing none of his old things he did. I ain't gonna grab nobody's old ass. I mean, I ain't gonna grab nobody's ass. You know, hey, I think we're on the 4th floor.
I'll grab it.
Was it worth it, what you found in the outside world? The love of a woman you can never have. Mika will never be yours in this life.
Then I will go to my death and pray I find her in the next. Will you give me what I ask?
Take the blade, guy, if you can reach it before me. A gift not forgotten.
What's so special about these swords? What do they do?
Depends.
What about a tall, strong, brave man like me?
They cut.
I think mine is broken.
Was it worth it, what you found in the outside world? The love of a woman you can never have. Mika will never be yours in this life.
Then I will go to my death and pray I find her in the next. Will you give me what I ask?
Take the blade, guy, if you can reach it before me. A gift not forgotten.
What's so special about these swords? What do they do?
Depends.
What about a tall...
I'm gonna ask you a question and you're not gonna hurt my feelings by your answer.
Uh-oh.
I have 14 movies. Am I a real actor?
You have 14 movies? That can't be true.
I know Shazam.
I was going to say, I'm aware of Shazam.
Oh, hold on.
Kazam, my bad.
11 of the movies I played Shaq. So, you know, my friends always go, you got 14 movies, but you're not really an actor. So do you consider me an actor? Hold on, time out.
Yeah, I do it big, big, big. I'm coming to win. I do it big, big.
Hulk approaches Dr. Doom asking him to perform a surgery that would separate him and Bruce Banner into two separate beings. Doom agrees, and after the surgery is done, he demands Bruce's body as payment, but his card declines, so Hulk snatches Bruce and runs away. Hulk retreats to a peaceful life in a cave, living among a tribe of Moloids. Meanwhile, Bruce becomes a mad scientist obsessed with becoming the Hulk again. He begins experimenting on animals, turning them into gamma-irradiated monsters who worship him as their creator, and sends them out to hunt down the Hulk. Agent Amanda, assigned to kill mad scientists, approaches Hulk and asks for his help in tracking down Bruce, who has turned an entire island into a haven of gamma-mutated animals. Hulk refuses, wanting nothing to do with Bruce. Suddenly, they're ambushed by gamma sharks. But even after the attack, Hulk remains unconvinced. When he returns to his cave, he finds most of his Moloid tribe slaughtered by two gamma boars sent by Bruce. Hulk takes them down and realizes that true peace and freedom can only come with Bruce's death. He seeks out Amanda and agrees to help her end Bruce once and for all. Amanda reveals that Bruce has taken things even further, attacking a military base with his gamma creatures, killing everyone inside, and stealing a massive supply of gamma energy with the goal of building a gamma bomb. Bruce injects himself with the gamma semen again and again, trying to turn into the Hulk, but to no avail. Meanwhile, Hulk arrives on the island and fights with the gamma animals. However, he feels bad for them and convinces them to stop being Bruce's slaves. The creatures admit they just want to be normal again, that all Bruce ever does is scream at them and make them cry. Moved by Hulk's words, they turn on Bruce and decide to help Hulk stop him. Hulk finally confronts Bruce, who launches missiles and bombs at him. Meanwhile, Amanda discovers a gamma bomb hidden on the island and urges Hulk to leave, insisting they should escape and let Bruce die to his own bomb. But Hulk refuses. He returns to Bruce and tells him he's only here to watch him die. He grabs Bruce's face and places it in front of the bomb, and it explodes on his face, killing him instantly. Days later, Hulk stands over Bruce's ashes, saying he can't help but hear the echo of his voice in his head, constantly screaming. Hulk approaches Dr. Doom asking him to perform a surgery that would separate him and Bruce Banner into two separate beings. Doom agrees, and after the surgery is done, he demands Bruce's body as payment, but his card declines, so Hulk snatches Bruce and runs away. Hulk retreats to a peaceful life in a cave, living among a tribe of Moloids. Meanwhile, Bruce becomes a mad scientist obsessed with becoming the Hulk again. He begins experimenting on animals, turning them into gamma-irradiated monsters who worship him as their creator, and sends them out to hunt down the Hulk. Agent Amanda, assigned to kill mad scientists, approaches Hulk and asks for his help in tracking down Bruce, who has turned an entire island into a haven of gamma-mutated animals. Hulk refuses, wanting nothing to do with Bruce. Suddenly, they're ambushed by gamma sharks. But even after the attack, Hulk remains unconvinced. When he returns to his cave, he finds most of his Moloid tribe slaughtered by two gamma boars sent by Bruce. Hulk takes them down and realizes that true peace and freedom can only come with Bruce's death. He seeks out Amanda and agrees to help her end Bruce.
This kid goes viral. Watch this interview. Young kid, go ahead and play this clip, Rob.
पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद जिंदाबाद शर्म नहीं आ रही
क्यों शर्म आएगी
Why should I be ashamed? पाकिस्तान को खत्म नहीं करना चाहिए
Pakistan shouldn't be
नहीं करना
destroyed.
चाहिए
It shouldn't
भारत
be.
देश जिंदाबाद है
Long live
नहीं
India, yes or no?
पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद है नहीं आपका नाम अपनी जगह पे सब जिंदाबाद आपका नाम क्या होगा तुम भी अपनी जगह पे जिंदाबाद आपका नाम क्या होगा कैफ कैफ पूरा नाम कैफ मोहम्मद कैफ कहाँ से हैं आप मैं बिहार से हूँ बिहार से आपको थोड़ी सी भी शर्म नहीं आ रही कि भारत देश में रहने के बावजूद आप पाकिस्तान का समर्थन कर रहे हो कि कैसे खत्म होगा पाकिस्तान अच्छा आप ही न्यूज बना रहे हो तो आपको शर्म नहीं आ रही कि क्या न्यूज बना रहे हो आपको शर्म नहीं आ रही है कि न्यूज बना के सबको फैला रहे हो हिंदू मुस्लिम के बारे में हिंदुस्तान का समर्थन क्यों करना आप पहले हमें जवाब दीजिए उसके बाद हम कुछ बोलेंगे तुम जो बोल रहे हो वहाँ भी आदमी है यहाँ भी आदमी है वहाँ भी मुस्लिम है वहाँ भी हिंदू है यहाँ भी हिंदू है सब तो है इंसान तो क्यों सबको खत्म करना पहले ये बताओ क्यों करना
This kid goes viral. Watch this interview. Young kid, go ahead and play this clip, Rob.
पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद जिंदाबाद शर्म नहीं आ रही क्यों शर्म आएगी
Why should I be ashamed?
पाकिस्तान को खत्म नहीं करना चाहिए
Pakistan shouldn't be
नहीं करना
destroyed.
चाहिए
It shouldn't
भारत
be.
देश जिंदाबाद है
Long live India, yes or no?
पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद है नहीं आपका नाम अपनी जगह पे सब जिंदाबाद आपका नाम क्या होगा तुम भी अपनी जगह पे जिंदाबाद आपका नाम क्या होगा कैफ कैफ पूरा नाम कैफ मोहम्मद कैफ कहाँ से हैं आप मैं बिहार से हूँ बिहार से आपको थोड़ी सी भी शर्म नहीं आ रही कि भारत देश में रहने के बावजूद आप पाकिस्तान का समर्थन कर रहे हो कि कैसे खत्म होगा पाकिस्तान अच्छा आप ही न्यूज बना रहे हो तो आपको शर्म नहीं आ रही कि क्या न्यूज बना रहे हो आपको शर्म नहीं आ रही है कि न्यूज बना के सबको फैला रहे हो हिंदू मुस्लिम के बारे में। हिंदुस्तान का समर्थन क्यों करना? आप पहले हमें जवाब दीजिए, उसके बाद हम कुछ बोलेंगे। तुम जो बोल रहे हो, वहाँ भी आदमी है, यहाँ भी आदमी है, वहाँ भी मुस्लिम है, वहाँ भी हिंदू है, यहाँ भी हिंदू है, सब तो है इंसान। तो क्यों सबको खत्म करना? पहले ये बताओ, क्यों करना?
This kid goes viral. Watch.
How to do carnivore diet challenge to lose 40 pounds in 4 weeks by April.
Most people quit their weight loss.
A 9-year-old. If I like a cornrow, I wear cornrow.
Only reason why you wear cornrow is because you got a brother on your arm. If you didn't have a brother, you wouldn't have no cornrow.
Ooh. Brother on my arm, no brother on your arm.
At least I know how to fry chicken.
I know how to fry chicken.
No, you know how to fry noodle.
I make a noodle good too, you know, not just a chicken. But I can make all things. I make a corn on the cob.
No corn on the cob.
I do. And I make potatoes and the green. If I like a cornrow, I wear cornrow.
Only reason why you wear cornrow.
They refused to bow. 3 Hebrew men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, stood before the most powerful king on earth and told him no. No to worshiping a golden image. No to betraying their God. No to fear. King Nebuchadnezzar was furious. This wasn't just disobedience, it was defiance. Heat the furnace 7 times hotter, he roared. The fire was so intense that it killed. The soldiers who threw them in, bound hand and foot, the 3 men were hurled into the flames. This should have been the end. Their clothes should have disintegrated. Their skin should have melted. But then, something impossible happened. Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? The king asked. Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Daniel 3:24-25. The fire didn't consume them. It set them free, and walking among them was someone divine. The flames didn't burn their skin. Not even their hair was singed. Their clothes weren't scorched. They didn't even smell like smoke. But even more shocking, God didn't keep them out of the fire. He joined them in it. Who was that 4th man? Nebuchadnezzar, a pagan king, called him like a son of the gods. Many believe it was Jesus Christ himself, appearing long before Bethlehem, stepping into the fire to protect his faithful ones. This is not just a rescue story. It's a revelation. Sometimes God won't deliver you from the fire. Sometimes he'll deliver you through it. He doesn't always stop the trial, but he will always walk through it with you. And when you emerge, you'll be freer than before. Your chains gone, your enemies silenced, and your testimony blazing brighter than the flames that tried to consume you. Don't panic when the fire gets hotter. You might be in the middle of a trial that looks like it will destroy you, but that's where he shows up. The fire doesn't mean God left. It means he's about to reveal himself. Stay faithful, stay standing, because the very place your enemies thought would end you will be where God walks with you. Lord.
The generational beef between owls and crows is the craziest thing ever. Like, they're literally born with the instincts to eliminate each other. During the daytime, crows will literally put together flocks and go look for owls, driving them out of their nest and out of their neighborhood. And during the daytime, owls are just trying to sleep. Talk about a rude awakening. However, crows have a good reason to do so, because when nighttime comes around, the tables turn. Owls can fly completely silent, and they will literally fly nest to nest, eliminating every crow they find, and their eggs. It's war. In other words, if you live in an area where there's both owls and crows, you live in a battlefield. The generational beef between owls and crows.
Our mission here is to increase road safety.
And how are we contributing?
So on May 9th, the video went pretty viral showing the French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer on a train that was moving from Poland to Kiev. In the footage, Macron is quickly seen removing a small white object from the table as reporters were entering the room, while the German Chancellor Merz appeared to be moving a small item, prompting widespread speculation on social media that the object was a bag of Colombian Bam Bam and not just a bag of sugar for tea. Now, these claims, of course, naturally got amplified by a bunch of bot accounts and Russian accounts or pro-Russian accounts, including the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova, who is suggesting that the leaders of these countries were using illicit substances. Now, to counter that argument, French media, including Liberation and Elysée Palace, debunked these allegations, asserting that the white object was a rolled-up handkerchief and the item near Mares was likely a toothpick or a drink stirrer and not drug paraphernalia. In addition to these refutes from the French media, there were some high-resolution photos released from AFP and AP news agencies that supported those claims because they showed the object as a tissue. The French government immediately labeled any rumors as a coordinated disinformation campaign that was aimed at undermining European unity, particularly as the leaders were in Kiev to discuss a ceasefire agreement. So on May 9th, the video went pretty viral showing the French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer on a train that was moving from Poland to Kiev. In the footage, Macron is quickly seen removing a small white object from the table as reporters were entering the room, while the German Chancellor Merz appeared to be moving a small item, prompting widespread speculation on social media that the object was a bag of Colombian Bam Bam and not just a bag of sugar for tea. Now, these claims, of course, naturally got amplified by a bunch of bot accounts and Russian accounts or pro-Russian accounts, including the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova, who is suggesting
she goes to the Greeks, the Syrians, and the Armenians who were living in Antioch. The Greeks, the Syrians, and the Armenians are all Christian. And she goes, honestly, who do you hate more? The Muslims who used to rule you, or the Christians who rule you now? And she goes, they say, oh yeah, totally, the Crusaders are horrid. We totally miss the days when the Muslims used to rule us. Any day, we will bring them back. She goes, so my mother was Armenian, my dad was a Crusader. It's Baldwin, the king, right, that guy. I'm born and raised here. I'm one of you. If you will follow me, let's do a rebellion and let's break Antioch away from the Crusaders. And let's do our own thing. She goes to the Greeks, the Syrians, and the Armenians.
The plan was to kill you. I had already made a deal with the rest of the guards. I doubled the cut that Dutton was paying them. But that didn't work out, did it? No, I was wrong. That's difficult to admit. But you have a gift, Mr. Castle. I assumed that the stories that I read in the paper about your attacks on the criminal world were apocryphal. How could one man be capable of such violence? But then I saw it with my own two eyes. And when one comes across someone with such talent, you don't let that go to waste. No, you don't. The plan was to kill you. I had already made a deal with the rest of the guards. I doubled the cut that Dutton was paying them. But that didn't work out, did it? No, I was wrong. That's difficult to admit. But you have a gift, Mr. Castle. I assumed that the stories that I read in the paper about your attacks on the criminal world were apocryphal. How could one man be capable of such violence? But then I saw it with my own two eyes. And when one comes across someone with such talent, you don't let that go to waste. No, you don't. The plan was to kill you. I had already made a deal with the rest of the guards. I doubled the cut that Dutton was paying.
Why did that sound so painful? Anyway, guys, just want to stop off for a while. It's about 3 hours. I got some other stuff I got to do. I'm done on my end. Thanks for joining me for this short period. I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.